What if everything you were taught about Christianity was carefully edited? What if the most powerful religious institution in the world spent 2,000 years hiding text that revealed Jesus' true message? And what if that message wasn't about sin and salvation, but about waking up to what you already are? In September 2024, archaeologist Dr. Miriam Castellanos discovered something in a sealed cave near the Dead Sea. Something carbon dated to 45 AD, just 12 years after Jesus died. Something the Vatican has tried desperately to keep buried. The complete Gospel of Thomas. Not fragments, not pieces, the whole text preserved in copper, containing 11 sayings of Jesus that were deliberately excluded from the Bible. When Elon Musk examined the manuscript in March 2025, his hands trembled. Not because it contradicted his beliefs, but because it explained everything he'd been searching for since childhood. "This changes everything we thought we knew about early Christianity," he whispered. The document described something the church had suppressed for centuries. A specific practice Jesus taught for transforming human consciousness. Not prayers, not rituals, but a technology, a method anyone could use to access what Jesus called the kingdom of heaven. Within days, millions would try it. Within weeks, institutions would crumble. Within months, humanity would remember what it had forgotten for 2 millennia. This is the story of how ancient truth collided with modern power, and what happened when the world finally learned what Jesus actually taught. The truth was buried. Now it's breaking free. The coffee in Elon Musk's mug had gone cold 3 hours ago. He didn't notice. His eyes stayed locked on the ancient pages spread across his desk at SpaceX headquarters in Hawthorne, California. Outside the floor-to-ceiling windows, the lights of Los Angeles twinkled like distant stars. Inside, under the glow of his desk lamp, Elon held something that might change human history. His hands trembled slightly as he turned another fragile page of the leather-bound manuscript. The writing was in Aramaic, but Dr. Miriam Castellanos had provided translations. Each word felt like a small earthquake in his chest. "Miriam, are you still there?" Elon spoke into his laptop, where a video call showed a tired woman with dark circles under her eyes. It was nearly 10 a.m. in Jerusalem. She'd been awake all night with him. "I'm here," Dr. Castellanos said, pushing gray-streaked hair from her face. At 43, she looked older tonight. The weight of what they'd discovered aged both of them by the hour. "What are you reading now?" Saying 77. Elon's voice caught in his throat. He read aloud, "Split a piece of wood and I am there. Lift up the stone and you will find me there." He stopped, looked up at the screen. This isn't about a god sitting on a throne in the sky. This is a consciousness in everything. Miriam finished his sentence. Her accent carried the music of someone who'd grown up speaking Hebrew, Spanish, and English all at once. A completely different message than what the church approved for 2,000 years. Elon stood up and walked to the window. Below, night shift engineers moved between buildings. They were building rockets to carry humanity to Mars. Noble work, important work. But what good was spreading to other planets if humans didn't understand what they actually were? "Tell me again how you found it," Elon said, though he'd heard the story twice already. He needed to hear it again, needed to believe this was real. Miriam's face softened on the screen. 6 months ago, September 2024, Cave 12 near Qumran. Same area where the Dead Sea Scrolls were discovered in 1947. My assistant, David, was mapping the cave walls when his equipment detected a hollow space. We broke through carefully. Inside a hidden chamber, we found a copper scroll container. Like the copper scroll, Elon said. He'd read everything about the Dead Sea Scrolls after Miriam first contacted him. Exactly like that. Copper preserved it perfectly. The manuscript inside was wrapped in linen. We sent samples to 3 different laboratories for carbon dating. Miriam pulled out a folder and held papers up to her camera. All 3 came back the same. The manuscript dates to approximately 4. Elon, that's just 12 years after Jesus died. This was written by people who actually knew him. Elon felt goosebumps rise on his arms despite the warm California night. He returned to his desk and stared at the pages again. The Gospel of Thomas, but not the version scholars already knew about. That version found in Egypt in 1945 was incomplete. Fragments. This is the complete original text. All 114 sayings, just as Jesus spoke them. Miriam leaned closer to her camera. Do you understand what this means? When Emperor Constantine made Christianity the official religion of Rome in the 4th century, he called the Council of Nicaea. In 35 AD, they decided which books would be in the Bible and which would be destroyed. They chose the Gospels that supported their version of Christianity, one that needed priests, needed the church, needed Rome's authority. And they buried the ones that didn't, Elon said quietly. They didn't just bury them. They tried to erase them. They hunted down every copy they could find and burned them. But some people who loved the real teachings, they hid copies in caves, in deserts, in places they hoped someone would find someday. Elon thought about his own children. Xa8A was only 4 years old now. Xa Techno and the others would grow up in a world that might be completely different because of what sat on his desk tonight. What truths had been stolen from humanity? What had been stolen from his kids before they were even born? Read saying 3. Miriam said gently. Elon found the page. His voice was steady, but soft. If those who lead you say to you, "Look, the kingdom is in the sky," then the birds will get there before you. If they say it is in the sea, then the fish will get there before you. But the kingdom is inside you and outside you. When you come to know yourselves, then you will be known and you will understand that you are sons and daughters of the living Father. He had to stop, take a breath, continue. But if you do not know yourselves, then you exist in poverty, and you are that poverty. Silence filled the line between California and Jerusalem. Finally, Elon spoke. He was saying, we don't need to wait for heaven. We don't need someone to save us. The kingdom, whatever that means, it's already here, already in us. That's exactly what he was saying, Miriam confirmed. And that's exactly why the church made sure nobody could read these words for 1700 years. Elon sat back in his chair. The leather creaked. His mind raced through implications like dominoes falling. If Jesus' real message was about recognizing divinity within yourself, then you didn't need a priest to connect you to God. You didn't need confession. You didn't need rituals or buildings or donations. You just needed to wake up to what you already were. No wonder they hid it. Miriam, I need to think about how to share this. The world needs to know. But, Elon, her voice turned sharp. Urgent. Look at page 47. The drawing. I need you to tell me what you see. He flipped pages carefully until he found it. His blood went cold. Geometric patterns covered the page. Not simple drawings, complex mathematical diagrams. Circles within circles. Lines connecting at precise angles. Symbols that looked almost like, "This looks like quantum field equations," Elon whispered. "But that's impossible. This was written 2,000 years ago." "I know," Miriam said. "I've shown it to physicists. They say the same thing. It resembles models of how consciousness might interact with quantum fields. Theories that didn't exist until the night." Elon traced the patterns with his finger, careful not to touch the ancient page. His heart hammered. How did they know? Maybe they didn't know it intellectually. Maybe they experienced it directly. Maybe that's what the kingdom actually is. A state of consciousness where you perceive reality at its fundamental level. Elon looked closer at the diagram. Something about it felt familiar. Not from his work, from somewhere deeper. From dreams he'd had as a child that he'd forgotten until this moment. Dreams of patterns, of light, of being everywhere and nowhere at once. "Miriam," he said slowly, "I've seen this before, in my dreams, when I was young." The archaeologist's face paled on the screen. "Elon, there's something I haven't told you. I've been having the same dreams since we found the manuscript. And I'm not the only one. David, my assistant, he's having them too. Patterns, instructions, like something is trying to..." Her face froze. The video call pixelated. Then her voice came through, panicked and breaking up. "Elon, someone's at my door. Ben Gurion Airport, I'm at the... Someone just tried to..." The screen went black. "Miriam? Miriam." Elon's office fell silent except for the hum of computers. The manuscript lay open on his desk, ancient wisdom preserved across 2 millennia. Waiting, warning, calling. He grabbed his phone and dialed his head of security. Outside, The Los Angeles night suddenly felt darker, more dangerous. The truth was waking up after 2,000 years of sleep, and someone very much wanted it to stay buried. Pretoria, South Africa. 13-year-old Elon Musk sat cross-legged on the floor of the Pretoria Public Library, surrounded by a fortress of books. Sunlight streamed through tall windows, catching dust motes that danced like tiny galaxies. He'd been there since the library opened at 9 that morning. Now his watch showed 4. His mother would be looking for him soon, but he couldn't leave. Not yet. Not until he understood. On his left sat a worn King James Bible, borrowed from the religious section. On his right, the Bhagavad Gita, the Quran, and a book about Buddhist philosophy. In front of him lay 3 physics textbooks he'd checked out 2 weeks ago, and already read cover to cover. None of them agreed with each other. Elon? His mother's voice echoed through the quiet library. Elon, I know you're here. May Musk appeared around a bookshelf. Her model-tall frame draped in a simple blue dress. At 36, she was raising 3 children mostly alone while working multiple jobs. Lines of exhaustion marked her face, but her eyes softened when she saw her son. It's almost 5 o'clock. You've been here for 8 hours. Mom, I have a question. Elon didn't look up from the Bible passage he was reading. His finger traced the words in Exodus. I am the Lord your God. You shall have no other gods before me. Another question. May sat down on the floor beside him, groaning slightly. Her feet hurt from a morning photo shoot. What is it this time? All these books say they have the truth. Elon gestured at the circle of texts around him. The Bible says there's one God, and Jesus is his son. The Quran says there's one God, but Jesus was just a prophet. The Buddhists don't really talk about God at all. They say suffering comes from attachment and desire. The Hindus say there are many gods, but also one ultimate reality called Brahman. He finally looked at his mother. His blue-green eyes were intense, frustrated, desperate. They can't all be right. They contradict each other. So how do we know what's actually real? How do we know what's true? May studied her son's face. This child had been different from birth. While other babies cried for food or attention, infant Elon had stared at lights and shadows for hours, transfixed as if trying to decode the universe through vision alone. By age 3, he'd taught himself to read. By 10, he'd read the entire Encyclopedia Britannica. But intelligence wasn't the same as wisdom. And right now, her brilliant son looked lost. I don't know if we can know for certain, May said honestly. That's why it's called faith, sweetheart. You believe without proof. But that doesn't make sense. Elon's voice rose, and the librarian shot them a stern look. He lowered his volume, but not his intensity. If something's true, there should be evidence. There should be a way to test it. Otherwise, how is it different from just making things up? What does your heart tell you? May asked. Elon looked down at his hands. They were scraped and bruised from yesterday. 3 boys from his school had cornered him after class, pushed him down, kicked him while he curled into a ball on the ground. They called him names. Weirdo. Know-it-all. Freak. My heart tells me that people believe what makes them feel safe, he said quietly. Not what's necessarily true. May reached out and gently touched the bruise darkening on her son's cheek. What happened? Doesn't matter. Elon, they said I think I'm smarter than everyone else. His voice cracked slightly. He hated that. Hated showing weakness. Maybe I do. Maybe that makes me a bad person. You don't think you're smarter. May lifted his chin so he had to meet her eyes. You think differently. You question things other people accept. You see patterns they don't see. That's not arrogance, honey. That's your gift. It doesn't feel like a gift. It feels like being alone. They sat in silence for a moment. Around them, the library began its closing routine. The librarian started turning off lights in distant sections. Can I tell you something? May said. When I was young growing up in Canada, I asked questions too. I wanted to understand everything. Why the sky was blue, why people were cruel, why the world seemed so beautiful and terrible at the same time. My mother told me that too many questions would make me unhappy. That some things were meant to be mysteries. Do you believe that? Elon asked. No. May smiled. I think questions are how we grow. Even if we never find all the answers, the searching matters. You're 13 years old, Elon. You don't have to figure out the meaning of life today. But I wanna, he said. And he meant it with every fiber of his being. May helped him gather the books. As they walked toward the checkout desks, she said, "You know what I think? I think all these religions might be like blind men touching different parts of an elephant. One feels the trunk and says it's like a snake. One feels the leg and says it's like a tree. One feels the tail and says it's like a rope. They're all describing the same thing, just from different angles." Elon considered this. So there might be one truth, but we only see pieces of it? Maybe. Or maybe truth is bigger than any one book or belief system can hold. They stepped out into the golden afternoon light of Pretoria. The jacaranda trees lining the street bloomed purple, petals carpeting the sidewalk. Elon breathed in the sweet air and thought about elephants and truth, and the way sunlight bent through tree branches. "Mom? Yes? When I grow up, I'm going to find answers. Real answers. I'm going to figure out what's actually true about the universe and consciousness and why we're here." May squeezed his shoulder. "I believe you will, sweetheart. I believe you will." SpaceX headquarters, Hawthorne, California. March 5th. Elon's phone buzzed, snapping him back to the present. He'd been sitting frozen at his desk for 3 minutes since Dr. Castellanos's video feed went dark, his mind racing through scenarios. Kidnapping. Surveillance. Worse. The text was from his head of security, James Reyes. "On my way. 8 minutes out. Don't touch anything. Don't call anyone else." Elon looked at the manuscript on his desk. 41 years after sitting in that Pretoria library, asking questions nobody could answer, he finally held something that might contain real answers. The original teachings of a man who'd apparently understood consciousness in ways that terrified empires into silence. And now someone was trying to silence it again. He picked up his phone and opened Signal, the encrypted messaging app, typed quickly to a private group chat he'd created 2 weeks ago when Miriam first contacted him. "We have a problem. Dr. C's communication cut off. Possible hostile contact. Activating contingency plan." 3 dots appeared immediately. Father Thomas Brennan, a Catholic priest Miriam had brought into their small circle of trust, responded, "I'm at the Vatican archives. I can confirm unusual activity." 3 cardinals entered the restricted section an hour ago. Never happens this late. Another message popped up from Dr. Patricia Goldstein, the Stanford neuroscientist who'd been analyzing the meditation practices described in the manuscript. "Just received anonymous email warning me to cease collaboration on unauthorized religious materials." How did they even know I was involved? Elon's jaw tightened. This was coordinated, professional. Someone with serious resources had been watching all of them. He walked to the wall safe hidden behind a picture of the first Falcon 9 landing. Inside, next to backup drives containing decades of SpaceX and Tesla data, he placed a USB drive with complete scans of every page of the manuscript. If something happened to the original, if someone tried to destroy it again, the information would survive. A 41-year-old memory surfaced, his 13-year-old self, bruised and determined, vowing to find truth. That boy would never forgive the man he'd become if he let fear win now. Elon returned to his desk and opened his laptop. Began typing an email to 3 journalists he trusted. Investigative reporters with track records of protecting sources and standing up to powerful institutions. Nora Blackwood at The Atlantic topped the list. Subject: the story of the century. Are you interested? His fingers hovered over the send button. Once he pressed it, there would be no going back. The secret would start spreading beyond their small group. The church would know. Governments would know. The story would take on a life of its own. But what was the alternative? Keep it hidden? Let truth die in darkness again? He thought about his children, about every child who'd ever been told they were born sinful, fundamentally broken, separated from the divine. About every person who'd lived in fear of a punishing God when the actual message might have been, "You are the kingdom. You are the light. You just forgot." Elon pressed send. The office door burst open. James Reyes entered, hand on his concealed weapon, eyes scanning for threats. At 52, James moved like a much younger man, former FBI, former Marine, now head of security for Tesla and SpaceX. His dark hair was flecked with gray, and he wore his standard outfit, Dark jeans, black jacket, earpiece connected to his security team. "Talk to me," James said, closing the door behind him. Elon explained quickly. The manuscript, Dr. Castellanos, the cutoff call, the coordinated surveillance. James listened without interrupting, his expression growing darker. When Elon finished, James pulled out his phone and made 3 quick calls, one to his team at SpaceX, one to a contact at the FBI, one to a private security firm in Israel. "Dr. Castellanos is okay," James said after the 3rd call ended, shaken but safe. Israeli security responded to a disturbance at her hotel near Ben Gurion Airport. Someone tried to break into her room. She's in protective custody now. Relief flooded through Elon. Thank God. There's more. The person who tried to break in wasn't a thief. He had Vatican credentials. The room seemed to tilt. The Vatican sent someone to what? Steal the manuscript? Threaten her? Unknown. He's not talking. But Elon, James sat down across from him. "I need to ask you something, and I need you to be honest. Do you believe this is real? This manuscript, these teachings, do you actually believe it's authentic, or is this some elaborate hoax?" Elon met his eyes. "I believe it's real. 3 independent labs confirmed the dating. The linguistic analysis checks out. Everything about it fits the historical context. But more than that," he paused. "There's something about the words themselves. They don't read like fiction. They read like truth." James was quiet for a long moment. Then, "I was raised Catholic. You know, altar boy, the whole thing. My mom used to make us pray the rosary every night." His voice carried something heavy. "Old pain. When I was 34, I had a near-death experience. Car accident. Technically died for 2 minutes on the operating table." Elon leaned forward. "You never told me that. I don't talk about it much. But when I was dead, or whatever you want to call it, I didn't see Jesus on a throne judging me. I didn't see heaven or hell. I saw," he struggled for words, "light, consciousness. Like I was connected to everything. Like the idea of being me was just a small part of something infinite." "What did your priest say when you told him?" "Said it was a hallucination. Brain chemistry during trauma. But it felt more real than anything I've experienced before or since." James looked at the manuscript. "If this says what you think it says, that the kingdom is inside us, that we're already connected to the divine, then what I experienced makes sense. But if that's true, then everything you were taught was wrong," Elon finished. "Not wrong. Incomplete. Like someone took a beautiful truth and turned it into rules and punishment and fear." James stood up. "If that's what happened, if the church really did suppress Jesus's actual teachings, then people deserve to know. My kids deserve to know. Even if it destroys your faith." James thought about that. Really thought. My faith shouldn't be fragile enough to break from truth. And if it is, maybe it needed to break. A notification pinged on Elon's computer. The journalist Nora Blackwood had already replied. "I'm listening. When can we talk?" Elon showed James the screen. "Once you tell her, there's no containing this," James warned. "I know. People will come after you. Religious leaders, politicians, anyone who benefits from the current system. They'll call you a heretic, an enemy of faith. Your reputation will—" "I don't care about my reputation," Elon interrupted. "I care about truth. That 13-year-old boy sitting in a library in Pretoria, trying to understand what was real. He's still inside me. I owe him this. I owe everyone this." James nodded slowly. "Then we'd better prepare for war. Because that's what this will become." Outside, clouds rolled across the moon. The SpaceX facility hummed with nighttime activity. Engineers preparing rockets, technicians running tests, security guards walking their rounds. All of them working toward a future among the stars. None of them knowing that the past was about to rewrite everything. Elon typed a response to Nora Blackwood. "Tomorrow morning, my office. Come alone. Bring an open mind and be ready to see something that changes everything." He hit send, then carefully closed the manuscript and locked it in his safe. The boy who asked questions had finally found an answer worth fighting for. Rome, Italy, March 16. Cardinal Giovanni Russo stood before the towering wooden doors of the Vatican's secret archives, his arthritic fingers fingering as he entered the security code. At 67 years old, he'd walked through these doors thousands of times. Today felt different. Today felt like the beginning of the end. The locks clicked open with a sound like breaking bones. Inside, the air smelled of ancient paper, leather, and secrets. Rows of shelves stretched into darkness, holding 12 centuries of documents the Catholic Church had deemed too sensitive, too dangerous, or too embarrassing for public eyes. Letters from Michelangelo, trial records from the Inquisition, correspondence about Galileo's imprisonment, and in the deepest section where even most Vatican officials weren't allowed, the suppressed Gospels. Giovanni walked past the regular archives, past the sections researchers could access with special permission, past the locked gates that required cardinal-level clearance. His footsteps echoed on marble floors laid down when Columbus was still a child. Finally, he reached the door marked only with a simple cross. No label, no sign. Those who need to know what lay beyond already knew. Inside, Father Thomas Brennan sat at a wooden table, surrounded by open manuscripts. The 44-year-old priest looked like he hadn't slept. His collar was askew, his usually neat brown hair stood at odd angles, and his eyes held the wild light of someone who'd seen too much truth too fast. "You shouldn't be here at this hour, Thomas," Giovanni said softly. His English carried the melody of his native Italian underneath. "Neither should you, Your Eminence." Thomas didn't look up from the text he was reading. "But here we are, both searching for answers in the middle of the night." Giovanni sat down across from him. His knees protested. Everything protested these days. Getting old was like watching your body slowly forget how to be young. "I received a call from our contact in Tel Aviv," Giovanni said. "Dr. Castellanos is safe. Our operative failed to retrieve the manuscript." "You mean he failed to steal it back?" Thomas finally met his eyes. "Let's use honest words, Giovanni. The Church doesn't own that text. It never did. Suppressing truth doesn't make you its rightful guardian." "Careful, Thomas. Why? What will you do, excommunicate me?" "I'm already halfway out the door." Thomas pushed the manuscript he'd been reading across the table. "Do you know what this is? The Gospel of Mary. Not fragments, not pieces. The complete text we've been hiding since the 4th century. And do you know what it says?" Giovanni didn't answer. He'd read it. Of course he'd read it. He'd read all of them during his 30 years working in the archives. The Gospel of Mary, the Gospel of Philip, the secret book of James, text that showed Mary Magdalene as Jesus' closest disciple, perhaps even his successor. Text that described a Jesus who taught wisdom and enlightenment, not sin and salvation. It says Peter was jealous of Mary. Thomas continued, his voice rising. Jealous that Jesus loved her more, taught her more. And Peter said, "Did Jesus really choose a woman over us?" And Mary wept because the disciples didn't believe her when she shared Jesus' teachings. That's in here, Giovanni, clear as day. And we buried it. We let 2,000 years of Christian history be shaped by Peter's jealousy and the early church fathers' misogyny. The church had to make difficult choices. Giovanni said quietly. When Constantine needed to unite the empire under one religion, we couldn't have dozens of competing gospels. We needed consistency, structure, a clear message, a controlled message. Thomas stood up, pacing. We didn't choose the texts that were most accurate or most true. We chose the ones that gave Rome power, the ones that made people dependent on priests and sacraments, the ones that turned Jesus' message of personal liberation into institutional control. Giovanni felt very tired. Sit down, Thomas. Please. Something in his voice made the younger priest obey. Do you know why I became a priest? Giovanni asked. I was 8 years old. My younger brother Marco was 6. He had leukemia. Stage 4. The doctors said there was no hope. His voice caught. Even 59 years later, the wound was fresh. My mother prayed every day. Every single day, she lit candles. She said rosaries until her fingers bled. And Marco died anyway. Thomas said nothing. Our family was destroyed. My father started drinking. My mother stopped talking. I was 8 years old, and I watched my family die along with my brother. But then, Giovanni's eyes grew distant. The church community, they brought us food. They sat with us. Father Paulo, our priest, he came to our house 3 times a week. He didn't have answers. He didn't explain why God let Marco die. He just stayed. And slowly, with their help, we found a way to keep living. Giovanni, the church gave my family back to me. Giovanni continued. It gave us structure when we had chaos, community when we had isolation, hope when we had despair. Yes, we've made mistakes, terrible mistakes. The Inquisition, the Crusades, the abuse scandals. His voice hardened, but we've also built hospitals, schools, charities. We've kept Western civilization alive through the Dark Ages. We've provided moral guidance to billions of souls. By lying to them? Thomas asked. By giving them what they needed to survive. Giovanni's hand hit the table. Do you think most people can handle the truth? Do you think they want to hear that there's no heaven waiting for them? No divine Father watching over them? No ultimate justice, that they're alone in an indifferent universe? That's not what these texts say, Thomas argued. They don't say we're alone. They say we're connected. They say the divine is within us. That's not nihilism. Giovanni, that's empowerment. It's chaos. Giovanni shot back. If everyone believes they have direct access to truth, direct access to God, then what prevents moral relativism? What stops people from justifying anything they want by claiming divine inspiration? The church provides guardrails. Without us, without you, people might actually be free, Thomas said quietly. The words hung in the air like incense smoke. Giovanni stood slowly. There's an emergency meeting in 30 minutes. The Congregation for the Doctrine of the Faith. All senior cardinals. The topic is Elon Musk and the Qumran manuscript. What are you going to recommend? Giovanni walked to the door, then paused. I'm going to recommend we do what we've always done when faced with dangerous truth. Contain it, control it, or crush it, even if it's real, even if it's what Jesus actually taught. Especially then. Giovanni turned back one last time. His face looked older than his 67 years. Ancient. Weary. Thomas, I know you think I'm a villain in this story, but I'm trying to protect something precious. When people lose their faith, they lose their compass. I've seen it happen. Good people become lost. Communities fall apart. Without the church, maybe we'd learn to stand on our own feet, Thomas interrupted. Maybe we'd grow up spiritually instead of remaining children who need father figures to tell us what's right and wrong. Giovanni's jaw tightened. You're young. You still have idealism. But I've seen what humans do without moral authority. I've read the history books, the wars, the atrocities, the suffering. And I've read the history of what humans do with religious authority, Thomas countered. Also wars, also atrocities, also suffering. The only difference is we did it while claiming God's blessing. There was nothing more to say. Giovanni left, his footsteps echoing down the ancient halls. Thomas sat alone among the hidden gospels, surrounded by 2,000 years of suppressed truth. He pulled out his phone and opened the secure messaging app, typed quickly. Emergency conclave called. They're planning something. Be careful. Tesla factory, Austin, Texas. March 16. Elon couldn't sleep. He tried for an hour after James left, lying on the couch in his office, staring at the ceiling. But his mind wouldn't stop racing. Questions upon questions spinning like electrons around a nucleus. Finally, he gave up and called the one person he knew would still be awake. Hello. His mother's voice was clear, alert. She was in New York for a modeling shoot. 3 hours ahead. Mom, did I wake you? Elon, it's almost 6 in the morning here. I've been up for an hour. What's wrong? He told her everything. The manuscript. Dr. Castellanos. The Vatican operative. The decision to public. As he spoke, he felt 13 years old again. Sitting in that Pretoria library, desperate for guidance. May listened without interrupting. She'd always been a good listener. One of the skills that made her a successful model. She knew when to speak and when to be still. When Elon finished, she was quiet for a long moment. Then, do you remember what you told me that day in the library? When you were 13? Which part? You said people believe what makes them feel safe, not what's necessarily true. Her voice was gentle but firm. That's still accurate. Most people don't want their beliefs challenged. They want certainty, comfort. The feeling that someone's in control, even if it's not them. So, you think I shouldn't publish it? I think you need to be prepared for the backlash. Religious leaders will call you the Antichrist. Politicians will distance themselves. People who've built their entire lives on certain beliefs, they'll feel attacked, threatened. Some will lash out. Elon looked at the safe where the manuscript was locked. But what if it's true, Mom? What if Jesus really did teach that the kingdom is within us, and the church buried it because it threatened their power? Don't people deserve to know? Yes, May said simply. They do. But that doesn't mean they'll thank you for telling them. Truth tellers rarely get thanked. They usually get crucified. The word choice hit Elon hard. Crucified. That's what they'd done to Jesus when he challenged the religious authorities of his time. 2,000 years later, were humans any different? I'm scared, Mom, he admitted. Something he rarely said out loud. Not for myself, but for the kids. For X and Isa and the others. What if this puts them in danger? Life puts them in danger, May said. Ignorance puts them in danger. At least if you publish this, they'll grow up in a world that has access to truth. That's the best gift you can give them. Even if that truth destroys everything people believe in, beliefs that can't survive truth probably need to be destroyed. Elon smiled, despite his fear. That's pretty brutal, Mom. I'm 77 years old, sweetheart. I don't have time for comforting lies anymore. She paused. But Elon, make sure you have support. Don't do this alone. That journalist you're meeting with today, the security team, the scientists and scholars who verified the manuscript, build a circle of people who are committed to the truth with you. You'll need them. I will. And Elon, one more thing. Yeah? I'm proud of you. That boy in the library who wanted to understand what was real, he grew into a man brave enough to share what he found. Not many people have that courage. After they hung up, Elon felt steadier. He made himself coffee, watched the sunrise through his office windows, and prepared for the meeting with Nora Blackwood. At 6:15 a.m., James texted. Journalist background checked out. She's Lurie. Waiting in lobby. Elon took the elevator down. The Tesla factory hummed with early morning activity. Quality control teams inspecting vehicles, engineers reviewing overnight production data, cleaning crews preparing for the day shift. Normal work. Normal life. Everything about to become abnormal. Nora Blackwood stood by the windows, watching the Texas sunrise paint the sky orange and pink. She was 38, dressed in dark jeans and a blazer, her black hair pulled back in a practical ponytail. She turned when Elon approached, and he saw intelligence in her eyes. And wariness. Good, she should be wary. Ms. Blackwood. Mr. Musk, thank you for seeing me on such short notice. Call me Elon. And let's get straight to it. I'm going to show you something that will change your life. Maybe change the world. But before I do, I need to know, are you willing to risk everything for the truth? Nora studied his face. That's a dramatic way to start an interview. This is a dramatic situation. She pulled out her phone and opened it to a photo. A young girl, maybe 8 years old, with Nora's eyes and smile. This is my daughter, Lily. She has type 1 diabetes. I'm a single mother. My career is how I provide for her. Pay for her insulin. Keep her safe, so when you ask if I'm willing to risk everything, I need to know what we're talking about. Elon respected the honesty. What if I told you the Vatican has been suppressing texts that completely change our understanding of Christianity? That Jesus' actual message was buried because it threatened institutional power. I'd say I need to see extraordinary evidence for such an extraordinary claim. Good answer. Come with me. They rode the elevator, up in silence. In his office, Elon opened the safe and carefully removed the manuscript, laid it on his desk under bright light. Nora approached slowly, like the text might bite. She pulled out her phone. May I photograph? Yes. Document everything. I want you to verify every detail independently. Contact your own experts. I'll give you names of the labs that did the carbon dating, the linguists who analyzed the Aramaic, the archaeologists who verified the discovery site. For the next hour, Nora examined the manuscript while Elon provided context. She asked sharp questions, demanded challenged assumptions, everything a good journalist should do. Finally, she sat back. If this is authentic, and that's still an if until I verify independently, this is the biggest story of the century. Maybe bigger. I know. The Vatican will come after you. After me. After anyone involved in publishing this. I know. People might die over this.
I know.
Elon met her eyes. But keeping it secret, that's also a choice. That's also death. Just slower. Death by ignorance. By spiritual oppression. By never knowing what Jesus actually taught about human potential. Nora looked at the photo of her daughter on her phone. Lily asked me yesterday why God gave her diabetes. Her Sunday school teacher told her it was part of God's plan, that sometimes God tests us through suffering. And my 8-year-old daughter asked me, why would God want me to suffer? Did I do something bad? Her voice cracked slightly. I told her no. I told her she's perfect, and sometimes bodies just don't work right. And it's nobody's fault. But she still believes, deep down, that maybe she's being punished. Because that's what the church teaches, that we're fundamentally flawed. Born in sin. She looked up at Elon. If this manuscript says something different, if Jesus actually taught that we're born divine, not sinful, then yes, I'll risk everything to publish it. Because my daughter deserves better than a religion that makes her feel broken. Elon felt something shift in his chest. Not everyone would understand. Not everyone would care. But the people who needed this message really needed it. They would find it. They would recognize truth when they saw it. Then let's get to work, he said. As Nora began making calls to her sources, verifying details, planning the article, Elon received a notification. An encrypted email from Father Thomas in Rome. Emergency conclave called. They're planning something. Be careful. Elon forwarded it to James. Added a note, double security, on Dr. Castellanos, on Nora, on everyone involved. This is about to get ugly. James replied immediately. Already on it. Welcome to war. Outside, the Texas sun climbed higher in a cloudless sky. The day looked beautiful. Normal. Perfect. But Elon could feel the storm building on the horizon. The truth was coming. Whether the world was ready or not, Jerusalem, Israel. 6 months earlier, September, Dr. Miriam Castellanos wiped sweat from her forehead, leaving a streak of dust across her skin. The desert sun hammered down on Cave 12 like divine judgment. Inside the cave, the temperature dropped 20 degrees, but the air was thick and still, making every breath feel like work. Dr. Castellanos, you need to see this. David Shapiro's voice echoed from deeper in the cave system. The 22-year-old graduate student from Tel Aviv University sounded breathless. Excited, maybe frightened, Miriam squeezed through the narrow passage that led to the chamber where David had been working. Her knees protested. 43 felt older when you spent your days crawling through ancient caves. She'd been doing this for 18 years, ever since she'd finished her doctorate at Hebrew University. 18 years of digging through the past, searching for something she couldn't quite name. Maybe searching for Raphael. She touched the small photograph in her shirt pocket. A habit. Her husband smiled up at her from 5 years ago, frozen in time, forever 39. The bombing had been random. Wrong place, wrong time. A bus stop in Jerusalem. Raphael had been coming home from teaching his history class at the university. Miriam had stopped believing in God that day. But she couldn't stop believing in the past, in evidence, in the stubborn persistence of truth, across centuries. So she'd thrown herself into archaeology, determined to prove that religion was just mythology, beautiful, comforting mythology that humans created to cope with mortality. Dr. Castellanos? David called again. Coming. She pushed through the final narrow section and emerged into the chamber where David stood. His usually neat appearance was disheveled. Dust covered his dark hair. His glasses sat crooked on his nose, and his hands trembled as he held the ground-penetrating radar equipment. The readings don't make sense, David said. Look at this wall. He pointed to what appeared to be solid rock at the back of the cave. It should be limestone all the way through, but the radar shows a hollow space behind it. A big one, maybe 3 meters by 3 meters. Miriam's pulse quickened. This was how the Dead Sea Scrolls had been found in 1947. A Bedouin shepherd boy throwing rocks into a cave, hearing the unexpected sound of pottery breaking. Discovery often came down to chance, or fate, if you believed in such things, which Miriam didn't. Not anymore. Could be a natural formation, she said, trying to control her excitement. Gas bubble in the limestone. Could be. David didn't sound convinced. Or it could be another hidden chamber. Like Cave 4. Like Cave 11. The Qumran caves had been giving up their secrets for 77 years. 11 caves had been specially excavated, yielding the Dead Sea Scrolls, ancient Jewish texts that revolutionized understanding of the Bible. But there were always rumors of more, of texts too dangerous to be left in the main cache. Of truths that needed extra protection. Get the hammers, Miriam said, carefully. If there's something behind there, I don't want it damaged by falling rock. Over the next 3 hours, they worked with painstaking care. Chip by chip, they removed what turned out to be a false wall, stones and mortar deliberately placed to look natural. Whoever had sealed this chamber had wanted it to stay hidden. Behind the wall, darkness gaped like an open mouth. Miriam's hands shook as she positioned the high-powered flashlight. The beam cut through 2,000 years of darkness and illuminated a small chamber, perfectly square, carved by human hands. In the center sat a copper scroll container. "Oh my God," David whispered. Miriam didn't correct him about using God's name. She couldn't speak at all. Copper scroll containers were incredibly rare. Only one other had been found among the Dead Sea Scrolls back in 1952. The copper scroll had contained a list of hidden treasures, written in a unique Hebrew dialect. This container looked similar but older, more weathered, more precious. "We need to call the Israel Antiquities Authority," Miriam said, her voice hoarse. "We need proper documentation, a full team, climate-controlled conditions. Dr. Castellanos." David pointed at the chamber walls. "Look at the inscriptions." She turned the flashlight to the walls. Ancient Aramaic covered every surface, carved deeply into the limestone. Even after 18 years of studying ancient languages, Miriam needed a moment to decipher the script. When she did, her blood ran cold, hidden from those who would silence truth, preserved for those who would speak it. The words of Yeshua bar Yosef, called Christ, as remembered by Thomas, called Didymus, written in the year of his ascension. "May those who find this understand, the kingdom is not where they told you to look." Yeshua bar Yosef. David breathed, "Jesus, son of Joseph." "This is Dr. Castellanos. This is from the 1st century. This is contemporary with Jesus himself." Miriam's mind raced. The canonical Gospels, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, were written decades after Jesus' death. Matthew and Luke probably dated to 80–90 AD. Mark maybe earlier, around 70 AD. John was latest, perhaps 90–100 AD. But this text claimed to be written in the year of his ascension, meaning 33 AD, the year Jesus died. If authentic, this would be the earliest Christian text ever discovered. "We open it," Miriam said suddenly. "What?" "No, we need to. We open it now. Here, before anyone knows we found it." Her voice carried an edge David had never heard before. Desperate. Fierce. "David, listen to me. If this says what I think it says, there are people who won't want it to see daylight. The church. Governments. Anyone invested in the current narrative. You're talking about conspiracy theories. I'm talking about history."
Miriam grabbed his shoulders.
"Do you know why we only have 4 Gospels in the Bible? Because in 3025 AD, Emperor Constantine called the Council of Nicaea and decided which books were acceptable. They destroyed hundreds of other texts, burned them, banned them. The Gospel of Thomas, the Gospel of Mary, the Gospel of Judas. We only know about them because copies survived in Egypt, hidden in jars, buried in the desert. Someone thought they were worth saving. But Dr. Castellanos, my husband died believing in a God who abandoned him," Miriam said quietly. Tears threatened but didn't fall. "He died believing he was a sinner who needed salvation. What if that wasn't true? What if Jesus taught something completely different, and it was buried because it threatened power structures? Don't we owe it to Raphael, to everyone, to know the truth?" David studied her face. He'd known her for 2 years, worked on 3 digs together, but he'd never seen her like this. Raw, vulnerable, human. Okay, he said. We open it. But we document everything. Photos, video, measurements. If this is authentic, we need ironclad proof. They spent the next hour photographing the chamber from every angle, measuring, taking samples of the mortar for dating. David set up a video camera on a tripod to capture everything. Finally, wearing gloves, Miriam lifted the copper scroll container. It was surprisingly heavy, about 15 pounds. The metal had oxidized to a green-brown patina, but the seal looked intact. Her heart hammered as she carefully worked the seal open. 2,000 years. This container had sat in darkness for 2,000 years, waiting. Inside, wrapped in linen cloth that crumbled at her touch, lay a manuscript. The leather binding was remarkably well preserved. The dry desert air and sealed copper had protected it. On the cover, more Aramaic, the Gospel of Thomas. The hidden sayings. Miriam opened to the first page. Her hands trembled so badly that David had to help her steady the manuscript. She read aloud, translating as she went. These are the secret sayings that the living Jesus spoke. And Didymus Judas Thomas wrote them down. And he said, whoever finds the meaning of these sayings will not taste death. Secret sayings, David whispered. Why secret? Miriam continued reading. The text was organized as a series of brief sayings, a loved one 14 in total. Some matched fragments of the Gospel of Thomas already known to scholars, the incomplete version found in Egypt in 1945. But many were completely new, or rather completely old. Original. Uncensored. She read saying 3. If those who lead you say to you, look, the kingdom is in the sky, then the birds of the sky will get there before you. If they say to you, it is in the sea, then the fish will get there before you. But the kingdom is inside you and outside you. When you come to know yourselves, then you will be known, and you will understand that you are children of the living Father. The kingdom is inside you, David repeated. Not in heaven, not after death, inside us, right now. Miriam felt something crack open in her chest. A space where grief had lived for 5 years. Raphael had died, believing heaven was his reward for suffering. But what if Jesus had taught that the kingdom, whatever that meant, wasn't a place you went after death? What if it was a state of being you could achieve while alive? She kept reading, page after page, tears now flowing freely. Saying after saying that contradicted everything the church taught. No original sin. No eternal damnation. No hierarchy between humanity and the divine. Just an invitation to wake up. To remember what you already are. When she reached saying 24, she had to stop. Her voice broke. David took over, reading. His disciples said, show us the place where you are, for we must seek it. He said to them, whoever has ears should hear. There is light within a person of light, and it lights up the whole world. If it does not shine, there is darkness. A person of light, Miriam whispered, not a sinner, not broken. Light itself. She thought about Raphael in his final moment. Had he died in darkness, believing himself unworthy? Or had there been a single moment when he'd remembered his own light? Dr. Castellanos, look at this. David pointed to saying 77. The Aramaic word here, it's been mistranslated in the known fragments. They translated it as man. But the word is gender neutral. There is light within a person of light. Not man. Person. Jesus wasn't excluding women. Later translators did that. Of course they did. The early church fathers had systematically removed women from leadership positions, rewritten texts to minimize Mary Magdalene's role, created doctrine that made women subordinate to men, all while claiming divine authority. Miriam kept reading. When she reached saying 10:08, she paused. This one was longer than the others, more detailed. It described a practice, a specific breathing technique, combined with focused awareness. Jesus said, if you bring forth what is within you, what you have will save you. If you do not have that within you, what you do not have will kill you. Take and eat this practice. Breathe as I show you, count as I teach you, see as I guide you. 4 breaths in, Drawing light, 7 breaths holding. Becoming light, 8 breaths out, sharing light. Do this in remembrance. This is my body, given for you. This is the path to the kingdom. It's instructions, David said, amazed. Not metaphor. Actual instructions for a contemplative practice. Like meditation, Miriam added. Like what Buddhist monks do. Or Sufi mystics. Or Hindu yogis. Jesus was teaching a technique for achieving altered states of consciousness. And the church buried it. Because if people could access the kingdom on their own, they wouldn't need priests, Miriam finished. Wouldn't need sacraments, or cathedrals, or tithes. They'd be free. They sat in silence, the weight of discovery pressing down on them. Outside the cave, the sun climbed toward noon. Somewhere, birds sang. Life continued, unaware that the past had just reached up and grabbed the present by the throat. What do we do? David asked. Miriam carefully photographed every page of the manuscript. High resolution, multiple angles. She uploaded the images to 3 separate encrypted cloud servers. Then she contacted 2 colleagues she trusted, scholars who valued truth over institutional loyalty. And she sent an encrypted email to someone she'd never met but whose reputation for truth-telling was legendary. Elon Musk. Subject: You won't believe what I found. But I think you'll understand why it matters. Now we authenticate, Miriam said to David. We test everything. Carbon dating, linguistic analysis, material composition. We build an evidence base so strong that nobody can dismiss it. And then we tell the world that Jesus was teaching something completely different than what we've been told. That the kingdom isn't a place, it's a practice. A state of being. And anyone can access it. David looked worried. The Vatican won't let this go public without a fight. I know. Miriam touched Raphael's photograph in her pocket. But some truths are worth fighting for. Worth dying for. She didn't know then how prophetic those words would be. As they carefully packed the manuscript to transport it to a secure facility, Miriam noticed something strange. On the walls of the hidden chamber between the Aramaic inscriptions, there were symbols. Geometric patterns she'd seen before in other ancient sites. Sacred geometry, patterns that showed up in Buddhist mandalas, Islamic art, Jewish mysticism, Christian cathedrals. Universal patterns. As if different cultures had been drawing the same map to the same place just using different languages. David, are you seeing this? He came closer with the flashlight. Those patterns, I've seen them in my quantum mechanics textbooks. They look like wave functions. Like probability distributions in quantum field theory. That's impossible. This was carved 2,000 years ago. I know. David pulled out his phone and snapped photos. But impossible or not, there it is. Miriam felt a chill, despite the desert heat. What had Jesus actually understood about consciousness and reality? What had he been trying to teach? And why had it been so dangerous that it needed to be erased from history? 6 months later, sitting in protective custody in Tel Aviv after someone tried to break into her hotel room, Miriam would remember this moment. The moment she'd held truth in her hands and made the choice to share it. No matter the cost. The truth was waking up after 2,000 years. And it was hungry. Private residence, Vatican City, March 16. Cardinal Giovanni Russo's hands shook as he poured his 3rd espresso of the morning. The cup rattled against the saucer, a sound like chattering teeth. Through the window of his private apartment, he could see St. Peter's Basilica rising against the pale Roman sky. Beautiful, eternal, built on the bones of martyrs and the secrets of centuries. How much longer would it stand if the truth came out? His laptop sat open on the mahogany desk, showing 5 faces in a secure video conference. Each face flagged to a man who wielded enormous power within Christianity. Together, they represented over 1 billion believers worldwide. Gentlemen, Giovanni began, his voice steady despite his shaking hands. Thank you for joining on such short notice. We have a situation that requires immediate action. Archbishop Michael Thornton, of the Anglican Communion, spoke first. At 61, the British clergyman had the crisp accent of Oxford education and the sharp eyes of someone who'd spent decades navigating church politics. Cardinal Russo, your message was rather alarming. You mentioned Elon Musk and a manuscript? Not just any manuscript. Giovanni pulled up images on his screen. The complete Gospel of Thomas, carbon dated to 45 AD, found 6 months ago in a sealed chamber near Qumran by Dr. Miriam Castellanos. Authenticated by 3 independent laboratories. Silence filled the video call. Then Reverend Dr. Marcus Freeman, representing the African Methodist Episcopal Church, leaned forward. At 59, Marcus had built churches across Africa and America, bringing Christianity to communities that mainstream denominations had ignored. His deep voice carried both authority and compassion. The Gospel of Thomas? We already know about that text. Fragments were found in Egypt and this is the complete version, Giovanni said quietly. Unedited. Before the Council of Nicaea decided what Christianity would become, Pastor Chen Wei from the largest Protestant church in China adjusted his glasses. At 47, he was the youngest on the call, but his house church movement had grown to 30 million members despite government persecution. What does it say that concerns you so much, Cardinal? Giovanni displayed a translated passage on screen. The kingdom is inside you and outside you. When you know yourselves, you will be known, and you will understand that you are children of the living Father. But if you do not know yourselves, you exist in poverty. Direct access to the divine, Giovanni said. No need for priests, no need for sacraments, no need for the church as intermediary. Jesus teaching people they're already whole, already connected to God, that the kingdom isn't something you earn through good behavior or faith. It's something you wake up to. Metropolitan Alexios from the Greek Orthodox Church stroked his long white beard. At 73, he was the oldest on the call. A man who'd spent 50 years in monastic tradition. This aligns with the mystical traditions of the Orthodox Church. The concept of theosis, becoming divine through participation in God's nature. Perhaps this text validates rather than threatens our faith. With respect, Metropolitan, you're missing the point. Giovanni stood up, pacing. If this goes public, people will ask why we didn't include it in the Bible. They'll ask what else we've hidden. They'll question every doctrine we've built over 2,000 years. Original sin? Gone. Salvation through Christ alone? Questioned. The authority of the church? Demolished. Reverend Freeman shook his head. Cardinal, I understand your concern, but we cannot suppress truth to protect institutions. If Jesus taught something we've misrepresented, don't we have a moral obligation to correct the record? Do we? Giovanni's voice rose. Do we really? Let me tell you what happens if we correct the record. Churches close. Communities fall apart. People lose their moral foundation. I've studied every major period of religious upheaval. The Protestant Reformation, the Enlightenment, the rise of atheism. Every time institutional religion weakens, chaos follows. Crime increases, family structures dissolve, meaning evaporates. That's not entirely accurate historically, Pastor Chen said carefully. Many periods of religious reform led to positive social change. After decades of violence and suffering, Giovanni shot back. The Reformation led to wars that killed 8 million people. Do you want that again? Do you want to tear Christianity apart just to reveal that Jesus might have taught something slightly different than what we've been saying? Archbishop Thornton cleared his throat. Giovanni, I think we all appreciate your passion for protecting the church, but surely we can find a middle path. Acknowledge the discovery, incorporate it into theological discussion, show that Christianity can evolve and grow. You're being naive, Michael. Giovanni sat down heavily. The moment we acknowledge this text, we validate every criticism that's ever been leveled against us. That we manipulated Scripture for power. That we silenced dissenting voices. That we prioritized control over truth. The atheists will have a field day. See? We told you religion was just institutional manipulation, and millions will walk away. Giovanni pulled up another document. I've been working in the Vatican's secret archives for 30 years. I've read every suppressed text we have. The Gospel of Mary, where Mary Magdalene is portrayed as Jesus's primary disciple and Peter is jealous of her. The Gospel of Judas, where Judas is the hero who helps Jesus escape his physical body. The secret book of James, where Jesus teaches secret knowledge only to select disciples. Do you know why we suppressed these? No one answered. Because Christianity needed to survive. In the 4th century, we were a persecuted minority. When Constantine offered to make us the state religion, We had a choice: maintain ideological purity and remain small and powerless, or compromise and become a force that could actually change the world. We chose power, and with that power, we built hospitals, universities, orphanages. We preserved knowledge through the Dark Ages. We created the moral framework of Western civilization. By lying about what Jesus taught, Reverend Freeman asked softly. Giovanni's face flushed. By emphasizing certain teachings over others. By providing structure and clarity instead of mystical confusion. Jesus said many things. Some of those things, taken out of context, could lead people astray. We provided guardrails. Metropolitan Alexios spoke, his voice like aged wine. Giovanni, I've known you for 25 years. You're a good man, a faithful servant. But I must ask, are you protecting the faithful, or are you protecting your own position? The question hung in the digital air. Giovanni closed his eyes. He thought about his brother Marco, dying at age 6 from leukemia. Thought about his mother's breakdown. Thought about Father Paulo, who'd sat with their family night after night, offering no answers but providing presence. The church had saved his family when nothing else could. But was that enough reason to suppress truth? I'm protecting both, Giovanni said finally. My position and the church's authority exist for a reason. We provide community, meaning moral guidance. Without us, people are lost. I've seen it, gentlemen. I've watched people leave the church and spiral into nihilism. Addiction, despair. Faith gives people something to hold on to. Maybe faith in truth is stronger than faith in comfort, Pastor Chen suggested. Giovanni shook his head. You run a house church in China. You face persecution daily. Your people cling to faith because it's all they have. Do you really want to tell them that the promise of heaven might not be what they think? That salvation might not work the way we've taught? That their suffering might not have the cosmic meaning we've assured them it does? Chen was quiet for a moment. Then, I would want to tell them the truth, whatever it is, because faith built on lies is no faith at all. Easy to say when you're not the one who has to watch their faces when their world collapses, Giovanni muttered. Archbishop Thornton tried to redirect. Gentlemen, let's focus on practical matters. What is Elon Musk planning to do with this manuscript? According to our sources, he's meeting with Nora Blackwood from The Atlantic. She's an investigative journalist with 2 Pulitzer Prizes. If she verifies the manuscript and publishes, it will reach hundreds of millions of people within hours. Can we discredit the discovery? Reverend Freeman asked, then quickly added, I'm not saying we should. I'm asking if it's possible. We tried, Giovanni admitted. We sent someone to retrieve the manuscript from Dr. Castellanos. He failed. She's now in protective custody in Israel. We also attempted to question the carbon dating results, but 3 independent labs confirmed them. The manuscript is authentic. Then perhaps, Metropolitan Alexios said gently, we should accept that God wants this truth revealed. Perhaps we've been wrong, and he's correcting us. Giovanni felt anger flash hot in his chest. With respect, Metropolitan, I don't think God works through billionaire tech entrepreneurs and journalists. I think Satan works through pride and rebellion, and the destruction of sacred institutions. That's quite an accusation, Reverend Freeman said, his voice hardening. You're calling Musk satanic for revealing a legitimate historical document? I'm calling him dangerous for undermining 2,000 years of Christian teaching without understanding the consequences. The conversation was deteriorating. Giovanni could feel it slipping away from him. These men, good men, faithful men, they didn't understand the stakes. They didn't see how fragile belief really was, how easily it could shatter. I propose we issue a joint statement, Archbishop Thornton said, acknowledging the discovery, calling for careful scholarly review, urging the public not to jump to conclusions. We control the narrative by participating in it rather than opposing it. And when the scholarly review confirms it's authentic, Giovanni asked, when theologians start writing books about how we've been wrong about Jesus' core message, what then? Then we adapt, Pastor Chen said simply. Christianity has survived worse than this. We survived the Reformation. We survived the Enlightenment. We'll survive the truth about Jesus' teachings. Maybe we'll even be stronger for it. Giovanni wanted to scream. They didn't understand. They couldn't understand. He'd spent his entire adult life serving the church, sacrificing personal happiness, romantic love, children of his own, all to preserve something sacred. And now they wanted to let it be destroyed by the revelation that maybe, just maybe, the institution had been wrong from the start? "I'm calling for Protocol Magdalene," Giovanni said quietly. Silence crashed over the call. Metropolitan Alexesios leaned forward, his eyes sharp despite his age. "Giovanni, no. That protocol was created for existential threats to the church itself. This is a historical document, not a nuclear weapon. It threatens the church's authority. That's existential enough for me." "What's Protocol Magdalene?" Pastor Chen asked. Archbishop Thornton explained, his voice tight. "A contingency plan developed during the Cold War. If information emerged that could fundamentally destabilize the church, evidence that Jesus didn't exist, proof that the resurrection was fabricated, things of that nature, the protocol authorizes extreme measures to contain the information. Pressure on media outlets, financial leverage, even," he paused, "even intimidation. We're talking about suppressing historical truth through intimidation?" Reverend Freeman's voice was incredulous. "That's exactly what atheists accuse us of doing. And you want to prove them right? I want to protect 1 billion souls from having their faith destroyed." Giovanni's composure finally cracked. "Do you know how many people commit suicide every year because they've lost faith? Because they feel there's no meaning, no purpose, no divine love watching over them. The church provides that meaning. And if we let this manuscript destroy the church, we're condemning millions to despair. Or," Metropolitan Alexios said softly, "we're freeing them to find authentic faith instead of comfortable lies." Giovanni stared at the old monk's face on the screen. "You would really let the church burn?" "I would let the church transform. Burning and transformation can look similar from certain angles." The vote, when it came, was 4-1 against activating Protocol Magdalene. Only Giovanni voted in favor. "Then I'm acting alone," Giovanni said. "I'm invoking my authority as cardinal to do what must be done to protect the faithful." "Giovanni, don't," Archbishop Thornton began. But Giovanni had already ended the call. He sat in silence for several minutes, staring at the closed laptop. Through the window, St. Peter's Basilica stood unchanged, as it had stood for centuries. But Giovanni knew that buildings, no matter how grand, were just stone and mortar. The real church was the faith of its people, and he would protect that faith, no matter what it cost. He made 3 phone calls. The first to his contact in Israeli intelligence, calling in a favor to keep Dr. Castellanos isolated. The second to a public relations firm specializing in crisis management. The third to a man he'd hoped never to speak with again, someone who specialized in making problems disappear. "It's Cardinal Russo," he said when the man answered. "I need your services. The target is a manuscript, and anyone who threatens to publish it." After he hung up, Giovanni walked to his private chapel and knelt before the crucifix. Christ looked down at him, frozen in eternal suffering. "Forgive me," Giovanni whispered. "But I'm protecting your church. That's what you'd want, isn't it?" The crucifix offered no answer. Outside, Rome woke to another beautiful morning, unaware that ancient secrets and modern power were colliding in ways that would change everything. The truth was hungry, and so was the institution determined to starve it. Manhattan, New York, March 16th. Nora Blackwood's apartment smelled like cinnamon toast and coffee. Her daughter Lily sat at the kitchen table, carefully measuring her blood sugar with the practiced efficiency of an 8-year-old who'd been doing this 4 times a day for 3 years. The meter beeped. 42. "Good number. Can I have the strawberries, Mom?" Lily asked, her dark curls bouncing as she reached for the fruit bowl. "Let me calculate the carbs first, sweetie." Nora pulled out her phone, opened the diabetes management app, typed in the numbers. 15 grams of carbohydrates equaled 1 unit of insulin. Lily needed 3 units for breakfast. Every meal was math. Every snack was chemistry. One mistake could mean a trip to the emergency room. "Mom, you look worried," Lily said, studying Nora's face with unsettling perception. "Did something bad happen at work?" Nora forced a smile. "No, baby. Just thinking about a big story. Bigger than the medicine company story? The one that won the prize?" Last year, Nora had exposed a pharmaceutical company that had deliberately hidden test results showing their diabetes medication caused liver damage. 3 executives went to prison. She'd won her second Pulitzer Prize, and Lily, who understood more about medicine than most adults, had been so proud. Maybe bigger than that, Nora admitted. She'd spent the morning in Austin examining the manuscript Elon Musk had shown her. Then she'd caught an early flight back to New York, her mind spinning with implications. During the flight, she'd made calls to 6 different experts, 3 biblical scholars, 2 archaeologists, and a carbon dating specialist. All of them confirmed the same thing. If the manuscript was authentic, it was the most significant religious discovery in modern history. Now she sat in her apartment, watching her daughter eat strawberries, and tried to decide whether to destroy her life. Because that's what publishing this story would do. Destroy everything she'd built, everything she'd created for Lily. Her phone buzzed. A text from her editor, Marcus Wu. "Call me. Now." Nora walked into her bedroom and closed the door. Marcus answered on the first ring. "Tell me you didn't actually meet with Elon Musk about some conspiracy theory involving the Vatican," Marcus said without preamble. "How did you?" "Because I just got a call from our publisher." "Who got a call from someone at the Archdiocese of New York?" "Who got a call from someone at the Vatican?" "They know you're working on a story about a suppressed gospel, and they're strongly suggesting we kill it before publication." Nora felt ice water in her veins. They can't do that. Freedom of the press. Freedom of the press doesn't mean much when our biggest advertisers suddenly decide to pull their contracts. Marcus interrupted. Or when Catholic schools stop assigning The Atlantic in their curriculum. Or when we get hit with defamation lawsuits before we even publish. Nora, whatever you found, it has very powerful people very scared. Good. Truth should scare powerful people. Damn it, Nora. I'm trying to protect you. Marcus's voice rose, then softened. Look, I've been your editor for 15 years. I've backed you on every controversial story. But this one, they're not threatening the magazine. They're threatening you personally. Your safety. Your daughter's safety. Nora's hand tightened on the phone. What did they say exactly? Nothing explicit. Just that you should be very careful about the information you choose to publish. That responsible journalism requires verification from sources the Vatican approves. That there are consequences for spreading religious misinformation. Marcus paused. Nora, these people have been suppressing information for 2,000 years. They're very good at it. So what are you telling me? Don't publish? I'm telling you to think very carefully. You have Lily. You're a single mother. If something happens to you, nothing's gonna happen to me. You don't know that. Marcus sighed. Look, I'll support whatever you decide. If you want to publish, we'll publish. But I need you to understand the stakes. This isn't like exposing a pharmaceutical company. This is taking on an institution with 1 billion followers and unlimited resources. After they hung up, Nora sat on her bed for a long time. Through the door, she could hear Lily humming while she drew pictures, probably more elaborate fantasy worlds with dragons and princesses. Her daughter's imagination was boundless, unburdened by fear or cynicism. How long would that last? Nora pulled out her phone and looked at the photos she'd taken in Elon's office. Page after page of ancient Aramaic text, translations showing a completely different Jesus than the one taught in Sunday schools. A Jesus who said the kingdom was inside you, not in some distant heaven. A Jesus who taught that you were already divine, not fundamentally broken. She thought about last Sunday at church. Lily had come home from Sunday school crying. "What's wrong, baby?" Nora had asked, holding her daughter close. Mrs. Patterson said God gives people challenges to test their faith. She said my diabetes is a test, that if I pray hard enough and believe hard enough, God will heal me. But I pray every night, Mom. Every single night. And I still have to take shots. Does that mean I'm not believing hard enough? Does God not think I'm good enough? Nora had wanted to march into that church and scream at Mrs. Patterson. Instead, she'd held Lily and said, "Your diabetes isn't a punishment or a test. Your body just works differently. And you're perfect exactly as you are." But Lily hadn't believed her. Because Mrs. Patterson spoke with the authority of the church. And the church spoke with the authority of God. What if that authority was built on lies? Nora opened her laptop and began typing. Not the article yet. Just notes, questions, observation. If Jesus actually taught that we're not born sinful, what does that mean for Christian doctrine? If the kingdom is a state of consciousness rather than an afterlife destination, what happens to the concept of salvation? If anyone can access the divine directly, what's the purpose of institutional religion? She thought about the people who would be hurt by this story. Not the Cardinal Rousseaus of the world. They'd be fine, cushioned by power and wealth. But the everyday believers, the grandmother who'd found comfort in her rosary after her husband died, the recovering addict who'd rebuilt his life through church community, the teenager in a conservative town where church was the only place she felt she belonged. Would they be better off knowing the truth? Or was ignorance actually bliss? Her phone rang. Unknown number. She almost didn't answer, then changed her mind. Ms. Blackwood? A woman's voice, accented Israeli, maybe. This is Dr. Miriam Castellanos. Elon Musk gave me your number. I understand you're considering writing about the manuscript. Dr. Castellanos. Yes, I am. Are you safe? For now, I'm in a secure location in Tel Aviv. But Ms. Blackwood, I need to tell you something. When I found that manuscript, I was an atheist. My husband died 5 years ago, and I stopped believing in any kind of God. I became an archaeologist specifically to prove that religion was just mythology. What changed? Nora asked. Reading those words. Jesus' actual words. Before anyone edited them or filtered them through institutional bias. He wasn't teaching religion. He was teaching consciousness. Awareness. A practice for waking up to what we already are. Miriam's voice caught. My husband died believing he was a sinner who needed to earn heaven. What if he died never knowing that the kingdom was inside him all along? That he was already complete, already whole? Nora felt tears prick her eyes. She thought about Lily, believing she was being tested by God, believing she wasn't praying hard enough. Dr. Castellanos, if I publish this story, I'm putting myself and my daughter at risk. I need you to tell me honestly, is it worth it? I can't answer that for you, Miriam said softly. But I can tell you this: truth is the only thing we leave behind that matters. Everything else, power, money, reputation, it all turns to dust. But truth changes the trajectory of humanity. Someone hid this manuscript 2,000 years ago because they believed future generations deserved to know what Jesus actually taught. They took a risk. They thought it was worth it. After the call ended, Nora walked back to the kitchen. Lily had finished breakfast and was now working on a drawing. Nora looked over her shoulder. The picture showed a little girl with curly hair standing on top of a mountain, arms spread wide, surrounded by stars. At the bottom, in Lily's careful handwriting, "Me being brave." That's beautiful, sweetie. What inspired it? You, Lily said simply. You're always brave, Mom. You tell the truth even when it's scary. I want to be like you when I grow up. Nora's throat tightened. She knelt down beside her daughter. Lily, can I ask you something? If you learned that something you'd been taught in church wasn't exactly true, that maybe Jesus was even more loving and kind than they said, would that make you sad? Lily thought about this seriously. Would it be the truth? Yes. Then I'd want to know. Because lies are worse than sad things. Right? Out of the mouths of babes. Nora hugged her daughter, breathing in the scent of strawberries and shampoo and innocence. Then she stood up and walked to her office. Opened her laptop. Started writing. The Hidden Gospel. How the Vatican Suppressed Jesus' True Teachings for 2,000 Years. By Nora Blackwood. 6 months ago in a sealed cave near Qumran, Israel, archaeologist Dr. Miriam Castellanos discovered what may be the most significant religious text in modern history. Carbon dated to approximately 45 AD within living memory of Jesus' ministry. The complete Gospel of Thomas offers a radically different vision of Christianity than what has been taught for 2 millennia. Her phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. Stop writing. This is your only warning. Think about your daughter. Nora's hands shook. She looked at the text for a long time. Then she blocked the number and kept writing. Because Lily was right. Lies were worse than sad things. And truth, even dangerous truth, was worth being brave for. 3 hours later, she sent the first draft to Marcus. Attached to the email was a note. I know the risks. Publish it anyway. Some stories are bigger than our fear, Marcus replied within minutes. You're either the bravest journalist I know or the craziest. Probably both. I'll have legal review it, but unless they find something libelous, we're running it. The Atlantic was founded to pursue truth. Might as well remember why. Nora walked back to the kitchen. Lily was still drawing, lost in her imaginary worlds. Hey, baby. How would you feel about going to stay with Grandma for a few days? Lily looked up, suddenly worried. Are we in trouble? No. But Mommy has a big story coming out, and I want to make sure you're somewhere extra safe while people react to it. Is it a good story? Nora smiled. I think it might be the most important story I've ever written. Then I'm proud of you, Mom. Lily went back to her drawing. Nora stood there for a moment, memorizing this scene. Her daughter, safe and happy, drawing pictures of brave girls on mountains. Whatever happened next, threats, lawsuits, professional destruction, this moment was worth protecting. Truth was worth protecting. That night after Lily was asleep, Nora received an email from Father Thomas Brennan, the priest Elon had mentioned. The subject line read, "Thank you." The message was simple. I've spent 12 years in the Vatican archives, watching truth gather dust while lies shaped the world. What you're doing is dangerous, but it's also holy, real holiness, not the sanitized version institutions sell. Be careful, but don't stop. Attached was a file, additional documentation from the Vatican archives, proof that the suppression of alternative gospels had been systematic and deliberate. Evidence. Nora added it to her article, strengthening the case. Then she sent a copy of everything. Manuscript photos, expert testimonials, historical documents to 3 colleagues at other publications. If something happened to her, the story would still get out. She thought about the anonymous text. Think about your daughter. She was thinking about her daughter. About a world where Lily wouldn't have to believe she was broken or being tested or not praying hard enough. A world where truth mattered more than comfortable lies. That was the world worth fighting for, even if the fight cost everything. Battery Park, New York City, March. The Statue of Liberty rose from the harbor like a ghost in the pre-dawn mist. Nora Blacklood stood near the water's edge, hands shoved deep in her jacket pockets, watching the first hints of sunrise paint the sky orange and pink. The park was nearly empty, just a few early morning joggers and a homeless man sleeping on a bench 50 yards away. She'd sent Lily to her mother's house in Connecticut yesterday. The separation had been harder than expected. Lily had cried, sensing something was wrong despite Nora's reassurances. I'll be back in a few days, baby. I promise. Grandma's going to spoil you rotten. You're scared, Mom. I can tell. 8 years old and already reading people like books. Nora had held her daughter close, breathing in her strawberry-scented shampoo one more time. A little scared. But being brave doesn't mean not being scared. It means doing the right thing even when you're scared. Now, standing alone in Battery Park, waiting for a meeting with a mysterious Vatican priest, Nora wondered if she was brave or just reckless. Footsteps approached from behind. She turned to see a figure in a hooded jacket, face obscured by the hood and the dim light. Medium height, lean build. He walked with purpose, but not aggression. Ms. Blackwood? The voice was American, maybe Northeastern. Boston accent underneath. That's me. And you are? The figure pushed back his hood, revealing a man in his mid-40s with kind eyes and the tired face of someone who hadn't slept well in months. He wore a simple black jacket over dark jeans, no clerical collar, no visible indication of his profession. Father Thomas Brennan. I'm the one who sent you those documents. I'm Veritas. Nora studied him carefully. She'd learned to read people during 15 years of investigative journalism. Father Brennan's body language showed exhaustion, determination, and something else, grief maybe. Or regret. Why meet in person? Nora asked. You could have sent everything electronically, because what I'm about to tell you can't be trusted to any form of communication. And because I need you to look me in the eyes when I say it. So you know I'm telling the truth. They walked slowly along the waterfront path. The homeless man on the bench stirred, but didn't wake. A jogger passed them, earbuds in, oblivious. I've been a Catholic priest for 22 years, Thomas began. I entered the priesthood after my fiancée Elizabeth died in the September 11 attacks. She worked on the 94th floor of the North Tower. We were supposed to get married that December. I'm sorry, Nora said quietly. I was 20 years old, a junior at Boston College. When she died, I felt like my entire future had been erased. I couldn't eat, couldn't sleep, couldn't see any reason to keep living. Thomas's voice was steady but distant, like he was recounting someone else's story. The college chaplain, Father Murphy, he sat with me for hours. Didn't preach, didn't quote scripture, just stayed. And slowly, the church gave me something to hold on to. A purpose, a calling. I thought God was giving me a new path, since the old one had been destroyed. What changed? 5 years ago, I was assigned to the Vatican's secret archives. Special project cataloging suppressed text, evaluating which ones might be safe to release to scholars. The church was trying to appear more transparent after the abuse scandals. Thomas laughed bitterly. Transparency. Right, more like controlled disclosure. They reached a bench overlooking the water, sat down. The sky was lighter now, the city waking up around them. I found the Gospel of Mary first, Thomas continued. Complete copy hidden since the 4th century. I read about Mary Magdalene being Jesus's closest disciple. About Peter being jealous because Jesus loved her most, taught her things he didn't teach the other apostles. And I realized, we've been lying about women's role in early Christianity for 2,000 years. Mary wasn't a reformed prostitute like the church claimed. She was Jesus's successor, his chosen one, and we buried her because accepting female spiritual authority threatened the patriarchy. That must have been difficult to reconcile with your faith, Nora said. It shattered me. But I told myself it was just one text. Maybe it was fringe. Maybe the early church fathers had good reasons for excluding it. Thomas pulled out his phone, scrolled to a photo, showed it to Nora. A young girl in a hospital bed, maybe 10 years old, with dark hair and pale skin. Tubes ran from her arms. Her eyes were closed. My niece, Sophie. This was taken 3 weeks ago. She's in a psychiatric hospital now. She attempted suicide. Nora's breath caught. Oh, God. I'm so sorry. Do you know why? Thomas's voice cracked. Because the youth pastor at her church told her that her depression was caused by sin. That she wasn't praying hard enough, wasn't faithful enough. That good Christians don't struggle with mental illness. Because God gives them joy. So Sophie, who's 10 years old and has clinical depression, a medical condition, she decided she must be fundamentally broken. Unredeemable. And if she was going to hell anyway, why bother living? Tears ran down Thomas's face. He didn't wipe them away. She's okay now. Alive. Getting real treatment. But when I sat by her hospital bed and held her hand, I thought about all the suppressed texts I'd been reading. All the teachings where Jesus said we're not broken, not sinful, not separate from the divine. And I realized we've been spiritually abusing people for 2,000 years, telling them they're not good enough, that they need us to fix them, that God's love is conditional, when Jesus's actual message, according to these hidden texts, was the complete opposite. So you decided to leak the information, Nora said. I decided the truth mattered more than my vows, more than my position, more than the institution I'd devoted my life to. Thomas turned to face her. Ms. Blackwood, I'm about to give you information that will destroy my career and possibly my life, but I need you to understand something first. I'm not doing this to hurt the church. I'm doing this to save it. The church at its best has always been about waking people up to their true nature. Somewhere along the way, we forgot that. We started putting ourselves between people and God instead of helping people find God within themselves. Why me? Nora asked. Why trust me with this? Because I read your article about the pharmaceutical company, the one that hid the diabetes medication data. You wrote about your daughter, about how these corporations were literally gambling with children's lives for profit. And you said something that stuck with me. Truth is not negotiable. Not for money, not for power, not for convenience. Some things are sacred, and truth is one of them. Thomas pulled a USB drive from his pocket. This contains everything. Photographs of every suppressed text in the Vatican archives that contradicts official doctrine. Internal memos from the 1940s when the church learned about the Nag Hammadi discovery. The library of texts found in Egypt had included early versions of the Gospels we've been hiding. Correspondence between Vatican officials and archaeological teams, showing systematic efforts to control and suppress information. It's all here. Nora took the drive carefully, like it might explode. In a way, it would. There's something else, Thomas said. Something I haven't told Elon or Dr. Castellanos yet. Saying 208 in the manuscript, the one that describes a breathing practice. I've been doing it every day for 6 months. And it works, Miss Blackwood. I don't know how to explain it in terms that won't sound crazy, but it works. After about 20 minutes of the practice, something shifts. The sense of being a separate self, the me that's Thomas Brennan, failed priest, guilty betrayer, it dissolved. What's left is just awareness, consciousness. And in that state, I can feel what Jesus was trying to teach. The kingdom isn't a place or a future reward. It's a present reality we can access by shifting our state of consciousness. Nora leaned back on the bench. The sun had fully risen now, warming her face. You realize how that sounds to someone who's not religious? Like mystical nonsense. I know. But here's the thing. It's not religious. It's experiential. Like saying water is wet. You can't convince someone through argument. They have to touch water themselves. Jesus wasn't asking people to believe in him. He was showing them a practice, a way of seeing that would let them experience what he experienced. And we turned it into dogma and doctrine and believe or go to hell. Have you tried teaching it to others? Sophie, my niece. When she was stable enough, I taught her the breathing technique. Told her it was just a meditation exercise, nothing religious. She's been doing it every morning before school. Thomas smiled for the first time. Yesterday, she told her therapist that she feels like she's more than her thoughts, that there's something peaceful underneath all the anxiety and depression. The therapist asked where she learned that. Sophie said, from my uncle who used to be a priest. Used to be? Thomas pulled out a folded piece of paper from his jacket, handed it to Nora. It was a formal letter, dated 2 days ago, addressed to the Archbishop of Boston. I, Thomas Michael Brennan, hereby resign from the priesthood effective immediately. I can no longer in good conscience represent an institution that prioritizes its own authority over the truth of Jesus' teachings. I entered this vocation to serve God. I'm leaving it for the same reason. I mailed it yesterday, Thomas said. By the time the Vatican realizes I'm the leak, I'll already be gone. No collar to strip from me. No authority to revoke, just a man telling the truth. Nora looked at this former priest, this man who'd lost his fiancée, devoted his life to the church, and was now sacrificing everything for truth. She thought about Sophie, 10 years old, being told her depression was sin. She thought about Lily, being told her diabetes was a test from God. There's something in the manuscript you need to know about, Thomas said. Something even Elon hasn't fully grasped yet. Saying 24, it says, there is light within a person of light, and it lights up the whole world. In the original Aramaic, the word we translate as person is gender neutral, not man. Person. But here's what's crucial. The word for light is the same word used in Genesis when God says, let there be light. It's not metaphorical light. It's the primordial creative force. Jesus was saying that same creative force that spoke the universe into existence. It's inside us. We are that. That's Nora struggled for words. That's heretical by traditional Christian standards. Exactly. Which is why they buried it. Because if people knew they carried divine creative power inside themselves, they wouldn't need priests to mediate. Wouldn't need sacraments to access grace. Wouldn't need the church to tell them they're worthy. They'd already know. A notification buzzed on Nora's phone. A text from Marcus. Legal approved the article. We're publishing tomorrow morning at 6 a.m. You sure about this? Nora typed back. Never been more sure of anything. She turned to Thomas. The Atlantic is publishing my article tomorrow, at 6 in the morning. I've doverned the manuscript, the carbon dating, the expert testimonials. I've included references to the Vatican archives and the systematic suppression. This story is going to explode. Good. Thomas stood up. The sun was fully up now, the park filling with morning walkers and commuters cutting through to the ferry terminal. I'll be at a retreat center in Vermont. St. Benedict's Monastery. They don't ask questions there. If you need to reach me, you have my secure contact. Wait, Nora said. The story mentions an unnamed Vatican source. Are you okay with me protecting your identity? For now, yes. But Miss Blackwood, when the time is right, when the story has spread enough that one person can't be silenced, I want to go on record. I want to use my real name. I want people to know that someone from inside the institution thought truth mattered more than loyalty. They shook hands. Thomas's grip was firm, steady. The handshake of someone who'd made peace with a difficult decision. One last thing, Thomas said. In the Gospel of Mary, there's a passage where Mary is weeping because the apostles don't believe her account of Jesus' teachings. And Levi, one of the disciples, tells Peter, if the Savior made her worthy, who are you to reject her? That's been the question for 2,000 years. Who are we to reject the voices the establishment deems unworthy? Women, mystics, anyone who experiences God outside approved channels. He started to walk away, then turned back. Your daughter, Lily. She's lucky to have a mother who teaches her that truth matters more than comfort. That's the real spiritual education. Not doctrine, not dogma, just courage to see clearly. After Thomas left, Nora sat alone on the bench for another 30 minutes. She watched the ferries come and go, watched people hurry to work, caught up in their daily routines, unaware that tomorrow morning the foundations of their faith might crack open. She thought about Sophie in the hospital, about Lily measuring her blood sugar, about all the people who'd been told they were broken when they were actually whole. The USB drive felt heavy in her pocket. 2,000 years of suppressed truth, compressed into ones and zeros. Tomorrow, it would all come flooding out. She pulled out her phone and called Lily at her grandmother's house. Hi, Mom. Lily's voice was bright, happy. Grandma made pancakes. That sounds wonderful, baby. Listen, I just wanted to tell you something. Tomorrow, my big story is gonna publish, and some people might say not nice things about Mommy. But I want you to know, I'm doing the right thing. Even if it's hard. I know, Mom. Because you always do the right thing, even when it's scary. After they hung up, Nora walked back toward her apartment. The city was alive now. Taxis honking, people streaming from subway stations, street vendors setting up their carts. Ordinary life. Ordinary morning. By tomorrow, nothing would be ordinary anymore. The truth was about to break free after 2,000 years of captivity. And Nora had her finger on the lock. SpaceX headquarters, Hawthorne, California, March 8. Elon Musk sat alone in his office. The city lights of Los Angeles spreading below him like a circuit board. The manuscript lay open on his desk to page 10-108. The saying that described the breathing practice. He'd read it a dozen times today. Each time, the words seemed to shift, revealing new layers of meaning. If you bring forth what is within you, what you have will save you. If you do not have that within you, what you do not have will kill you. He'd built rockets to reach Mars, electric cars to save the planet, neural interfaces to expand human consciousness. All his work had been about pushing humanity forward, making impossible things possible. But what if the most important technology was 2,000 years old and required no equipment at all? His phone showed 11:47 p.m. In 6 hours and 13 minutes, Nora's article would publish. The world would know about the manuscript. There would be no going back. Elon stood and walked to the window. Below, night shift engineers worked on Starship prototypes. They were building humanity's future among the stars. But what were they taking with them? What consciousness would colonize Mars? The same fear-based, separation-based thinking that had nearly destroyed Earth. He returned to his desk and read the instructions again. Take and eat this practice. Breathe as I show you, count as I teach you, see as I guide you. 4 breaths in, drawing light. 7 breaths holding, becoming light. 8 breaths out, sharing light. Elon had tried it twice before. Brief attempts, impatient, distracted by incoming messages and meetings. Nothing had happened. But tonight, with the weight of tomorrow pressing down, he decided to really commit. He turned off his phone, locked his office door, dimmed the lights until only the desk lamp glowed. Sat in his chair, spine straight, hands resting on his knees. 4 counts in, 7 counts hold, 8 counts out. He began. The first 10 minutes were torture. His mind raced with thoughts. Tomorrow's meetings, production quotas, the article launch, threats from the Vatican, his children's safety. His body itched. His nose needed scratching. His legs wanted to move. But he kept breathing. 4 in, 7 hold. 8 out. By 15 minutes, the mental chatter began to quiet. Thoughts still arose but seemed less urgent, less demanding of attention. Like clouds passing through a sky instead of storms demanding response. 4 in, 7 hold, 8 out. At 20 minutes, something shifted. It wasn't dramatic. No lights, no visions, no voice of God. Just a subtle change in the quality of awareness itself. The sense of being Elon Musk, billionaire, engineer, father, public figure, began to feel less solid, less real, like a role he was playing rather than what he fundamentally was. 4 in, 7 hold, 8 out. At 25 minutes, the boundaries dissolved. There was no way to describe it adequately. The feeling of being a separate self, locked inside a skull, looking out at a world out there, it evaporated. What remained was just awareness itself. Vast, spacious, connected to everything. Elon could feel the engineers working in the factory below, not through telepathy or magic, but through a direct recognition that their consciousness and his consciousness were the same consciousness, experiencing itself through different bodies. He could feel the city breathing around him, the trees, the ocean, the planet spinning through space. Not separate things, but one thing, expressing itself as many. And in that moment, Elon understood what Jesus had been trying to teach. The kingdom of heaven wasn't a place. It wasn't a reward for good behavior. It was this recognition that separation was the illusion and connection was the truth. That the consciousness looking through his eyes was the same consciousness that looked through every pair of eyes. That had always been looking, would always be looking. I am the light of the world, Jesus had said. Not I, Jesus, am special and you're not. But I, consciousness itself, am the light of the world. Split a piece of wood and you'll find me there. Lift a stone and I am there. Because consciousness was in everything. Was everything. Tears streamed down Elon's face. Not sad tears, not happy tears. Just tears of recognition, of coming home to something he'd always been but had forgotten. He sat in that state for 15 more minutes. Timeless, boundless, free. Eventually, slowly, the sense of being Elon returned. The boundaries reformed. The separation reinstated itself. But something had fundamentally changed. He could still feel the echo of that unity, like a taste on his tongue or a song remembered from childhood. He opened his eyes. The clock showed 12:52 a.m. He'd been sitting for over an hour. Elon picked up his phone with trembling hands. Dozens of missed messages. He ignored them all except one from his mother. Elon, are you okay? You've been quiet all evening. He typed back. Mom, I just experienced what Jesus was teaching. I understand now. I really understand. 3 dots appeared, disappeared, appeared again. Then, tell me. He called her instead. May answered immediately. You sound different, she said. Your voice sounds, I don't know, lighter? I tried the practice from the manuscript, the breathing technique in Seeing 108. Elon struggled to find words. Mom, it worked. For about 15 minutes, there was no me, just awareness, just consciousness experiencing itself. And I felt connected to everything, like the separation between me and the world was just a story I'd been telling myself. What you're describing sounds like what mystics have talked about for thousands of years. May said softly. The dissolution of ego, unity consciousness, enlightenment. It wasn't religious, though. It was just true, like discovering water is wet or fire is hot. A direct experience of what's already there, underneath all the thinking and identifying. And this is what Jesus was teaching? I think so. He wasn't asking people to worship him. He was showing them how to experience what he was experiencing. The kingdom within, the light within, direct access to the source of consciousness itself. Elon stood up, energized despite the late hour. Mom, if everyone knew they could access this, if everyone understood they're not separate, not broken, not sinful, The world would be completely different, May finished. No wonder they buried it. Stanford University, Palo Alto, California. March 9. Dr. Patricia Goldstein had been studying consciousness for 23 years. At 49, she'd published over 100 papers on neuroscience, meditation, and altered states. She'd scanned the brains of Buddhist monks, studied the effects of psychedelics, investigated near-death experiences, but nothing had prepared her for what she was seeing on her monitors right now. Subject 7, can you hear me? She spoke into the intercom. In the fMRI chamber, a volunteer named Alex, a 32-year-old software engineer who'd been practicing the technique from saying Tentrinitate for 5 days, gave a thumbs up without opening his eyes. Patricia watched the brain scans. The default mode network, the part of the brain responsible for self-referential thinking. The me narrative showed dramatically reduced activity. Meanwhile, areas associated with present moment awareness and spatial perception were lighting up in patterns she'd only seen in the most advanced meditators. But there was something else. Something unprecedented. The brain waves were synchronizing across hemispheres in a way that shouldn't be possible. Gamma waves, the fastest brain waves associated with heightened perception and consciousness, were firing in perfect coherence across multiple brain regions simultaneously. This is remarkable, whispered her research assistant, Dr. James Chen. It's like his entire brain is operating as one unified system instead of separate modules. Patricia made notes frantically. Subject 7 has only been practicing for 5 days. Most meditation studies require years of practice to show significant neural changes. This is extraordinarily rapid. She spoke into the intercom again. Alex, I'm going to ask you some questions. Just answer honestly. Do you feel like yourself right now? A pause. Then Alex's voice, dreamy and distant. There is no self to feel like, there's just awareness. Experiencing. Do you know your name? Alex. But it feels like a label, not what I am. Like calling water H2O accurate but missing the essence. Patricia and James exchanged glances. Can you describe what you're experiencing? Everything is connected. Not metaphorically. Actually connected. My body, your body, the machine, the room. It's all one thing experiencing itself. The boundaries are, Alex paused, searching for words. Imaginary, useful for navigating daily life but not ultimately real. Patricia's hands shook slightly as she made notes. This wasn't psychosis. Alex's responses were coherent, articulate, and remarkably similar to reports from mystics across traditions: Christian, Buddhist, Hindu, Sufi. But those traditions required years of practice. This technique was producing profound effects in days. Okay, Alex, I'm gonna bring you back. Start noticing your body, your breathing, the sounds around you. Over the next 5 minutes, the brain scans gradually returned to normal patterns. The default mode network reactivated. The sense of self reconstructed itself. When Alex emerged from the chamber, he looked dazed but peaceful. How do you feel? Patricia asked. Like I just remembered something I've always known but forgot. Like coming home. Alex sat down, rubbing his eyes. Dr. Goldstein, is that what Jesus was teaching? That state? Based on the manuscript, yes. It appears Jesus developed a specific practice for inducing what we might call non-dual awareness, the direct experience of consciousness without the filter of self-identification. It's incredible, Alex said. I've been an atheist my whole life. Thought religion was just fairy tales. But this isn't religion. This is neuroscience. This is just how consciousness actually works when you strip away the conditioning. Patricia nodded slowly. That's what makes this so revolutionary. It's not asking people to believe anything. It's offering a verifiable, reproducible method for experiencing a different state of consciousness. Like the scientific method, but for inner exploration. Her phone buzzed. A text from Elon Musk. Have you tried the practice yourself? I just did. We need to talk. Patricia had been avoiding trying it herself, wanting to maintain scientific objectivity. But now, James, can you monitor me? I'm going in the chamber. Dr. Goldstein, are you sure that's... I have to know. If this is real, I need to experience it directly. 20 minutes later. Patricia understood why ancient religious authorities had been so afraid. The experience wasn't religious. It was liberating. For 15 minutes, she existed without the constant anxiety about her career, her reputation, her place in the academic hierarchy. Without the voice in her head judging every thought, planning every move, defending her identity. Just awareness. Just peace. Just the recognition that she was not the small, separate self she'd been believing herself to be. When she came back, tears streamed down her face. She couldn't finish the sentence. James looked concerned. "Are you okay?" "I'm better than okay. I just realized I've spent my entire career studying consciousness while completely missing what consciousness actually is. Not a thing the brain produces, but what the brain appears in. What everything appears in." She pulled out her phone and began typing rapidly. An email to Elon, to Father Thomas, to Nora. The practice is real. The effects are measurable. And we need to get this information out carefully. Because what Jesus was teaching isn't just spiritually significant, it's scientifically revolutionary. He developed a technology for shifting human consciousness that we're only now beginning to understand. Boston, Massachusetts. March 19. Detective James Reyes sat in his car outside his daughter's school, waiting for pickup. His hands gripped the steering wheel as he practiced the breathing technique for the third time that day. 4 in, 7 hold, 8 out. After Elon had told him about his experience, James had been skeptical. He was a practical man. Former Marine, former FBI. He dealt with evidence, not mystical experiences, but he tried it anyway. Out of curiosity, out of respect for Elon, out of a desperate hope that maybe, just maybe, there was more to reality than the darkness he'd been carrying since his days in combat. The first 2 attempts had been frustrating. His mind wouldn't quiet. His body wouldn't relax. But this third time, something cracked open. For just a few minutes, the PTSD symptoms that had haunted him for 15 years, the hypervigilance, the intrusive memories, the sense of being perpetually under threat, they dissolved, not because he fought them or pushed them away, but because the James who carried trauma temporarily ceased to exist. What remained was just awareness itself. Peaceful, whole, complete. When his daughter Emily emerged from school, James was crying. "Dad, what's wrong?" Emily rushed to the car, 14 years old and suddenly worried. "Nothing's wrong, sweetheart." James wiped his eyes. "Everything's actually right." For the first time in a very long time, that evening at home, James gathered his wife Sarah and their 3 kids around the kitchen table. "I need to tell you something. The work I've been doing for Elon, it's not just security. We've discovered something important, something that's going to change a lot of people's understanding of religion and consciousness." He told them about the manuscript, the suppressed teachings, the practice that had just given him 15 minutes of peace after 15 years of suffering. Sarah, who'd watched her husband struggle with nightmares and panic attacks since he'd left the FBI, studied his face. "You look different. Lighter. I feel lighter. For the first time, I feel like maybe I'm not just the sum of my trauma. Maybe there's something underneath all that damage. Something that was never damaged." "Is this going to be dangerous?" his oldest son Marcus asked. He was 17, preparing for college, already worried about his father's high-risk security work. "Yes," James said honestly. "The church is not going to like this information getting out. There might be threats. There might be attempts to discredit us. But kids, sometimes the right thing is also the dangerous thing. And I'd rather you grow up seeing your dad stand up for truth than play it safe and live with regret." Emily spoke up, her voice small. "At Sunday school, Mrs. Henderson said we're all sinners and we need Jesus to save us, or we'll go to hell. Is that true?" James took a breath. This was the moment. The choice between institutional loyalty and truth. "No, sweetie, I don't think that's true. I think Jesus was trying to teach something very different, that we're not broken or sinful. That the kingdom of God is already inside us and we just need to learn how to see it." Will we get in trouble for not believing what church says? Maybe. But being in trouble for truth is better than being comfortable with lies. Later that night, after the kids were in bed, Sarah found James sitting in the dark living room. "You really think this manuscript is authentic?" she asked. "I do. But more than that, I tried the practice it describes. And Sarah, it worked. For the first time since Iraq, I felt peace. Real peace. Not the fake peace from medication or therapy or trying to think positive. Actual peace that comes from recognizing you're more than your thoughts and feelings and memories. Sarah sat beside him. The church we've been going to for 10 years, they're not going to accept this. Father O'Brien will say it's heresy. I know. We might lose friends, community. The kids might face questions at school. I know. But you're going to support this anyway. I am. James turned to face her. Because Emily asked if she's a sinner going to hell. And I can't let my daughter grow up believing that about herself. Not when there's evidence that Jesus taught something completely different. Sarah was quiet for a long moment. Then teach me the practice. I want to try it. James showed her the breathing pattern. 4 in, 7 hold, 8 out. They sat together in the darkness, breathing in unison. Two people who'd built their lives on certain beliefs, now willing to let those beliefs crack open if truth demanded it. Tomorrow, Nora's article would publish. Tomorrow, the world would fracture along new lines. But tonight, in this moment, two people breathed together and remembered what it felt like to be whole. Tel Aviv, Israel, March 20. Dr. Miriam Castellanos couldn't sleep. She stood on the balcony of the safe house, watching the Mediterranean Sea catch the first light of dawn. In a few hours, Nora's article would publish. The secret she'd been carrying for 6 months would become public knowledge. She pulled out Raphael's photograph from her pocket. 5 years since the bombing. 5 years of anger at a God she no longer believed in. But now, she'd been practicing the technique from saying 108 every morning for 2 weeks. And something had shifted. The grief was still there. She would always miss Raphael. But underneath the grief, she'd discovered something else. A peace that didn't depend on circumstances. A connection that death couldn't sever. I think I understand now, she whispered to Raphael's photograph. The kingdom Jesus talked about, it's not a place we go after death. It's what we already are. What you already were. What you still are. Just without the body. Consciousness itself. Eternal and unbroken. She didn't know if that was true. Couldn't prove it. But the practice had shown her that consciousness was stranger, more vast, more mysterious than materialist science suggested. Maybe death wasn't the end. Maybe it was just another transformation of the same eternal awareness. I'm going to make sure people know what Jesus really taught, she said to the photograph. Not for religion, for truth. And for everyone like me who needs to know they're not broken. That grief doesn't mean God abandoned us. That maybe there's something underneath all the pain that was never touched by pain. The sun broke over the horizon. A new day. The day truth would begin its journey out of darkness. Miriam took a deep breath, 4 counts in, 7 counts hold, 8 counts out, and felt connected to everything. To Raphael, to the ocean, to every person who would read Nora's article today and begin questioning everything they'd been taught. The practice worked because consciousness was real, was primary, was what everything else arose within. Jesus had known that 2,000 years ago. Now finally, the world would know it too. New York City, March 20. The article went live at exactly 6 in the morning. Nora Blackwood sat at her kitchen table, laptop open, watching the page refresh. The headline appeared in bold letters across the Atlantic's homepage. The Hidden Gospel. How the Vatican suppressed Jesus' true teachings for 2,000 years. A newly discovered manuscript reveals that Christianity's core message may have been deliberately altered by 4th century Roman artifice. What did Jesus actually teach? And why was it buried? By Nora Blackwood. Her hands trembled as she took a sip of coffee. The apartment felt too quiet without Lily's morning chatter. She checked her phone. A text from her mother's house showing Lily asleep. Peaceful. Unaware that her mother had just thrown a grenade into the foundations of Western religion. The website's traffic counter began climbing. 100 views. 500. 2,000. Within 10 minutes, 10,000 people had read the opening paragraphs. Within an hour, the article was the most viewed story in the Atlantic's 16-year history. By 7:00 a.m., it had been shared 300,000 times on social media. Nora's phone exploded with notifications. Text messages. Emails. Calls from other journalists. Her inbox flooded with reactions ranging from grateful to threatening. One email. From a woman in Ohio. I've been planning to end my life for weeks. I'm a mother of 3, but I have severe depression, and my church told me it was demonic oppression that I wasn't faithful enough. Your article showed me that maybe I'm not broken. Maybe Jesus never said I was broken. Thank you for saving my life. Another email from someone claiming to be a Monsignor. You will burn in hell for this blasphemy. You and your bastard daughter. Nora's stomach turned at the mention of Lily. She forwarded the threatening email to Detective Reyes, who'd been coordinating security. His response came immediately. Already tracking these. You have 2 plainclothes officers outside your building. Don't leave alone. By 8 a.m., every major news network was covering the story. CNN, Fox News, MSNBC, BBC, all leading with variations of the same headline: Ancient Manuscript Challenges Core Christian Beliefs. Nora turned on the television. The CNN anchor interviewed a biblical scholar from Princeton. Dr. Hartley, what's your initial assessment of this manuscript? The scholar, a woman in her 60s with steel gray hair, looked both excited and cautious. Based on the carbon dating reports and the photographic evidence in Ms. Blackwood's article, this appears to be authentic. A complete Gospel of Thomas from approximately 45 AD would be the earliest Christian text we've ever discovered, predating the canonical Gospels by decades. And the content. The suggestion that Jesus taught something different than what's in the Bible. The Gospel of Thomas has been known in fragmentary form since, but this complete version apparently contains teachings that align more closely with Eastern philosophical traditions. The idea that the divine is within us, that enlightenment comes from self-knowledge rather than external salvation. This would represent a Christianity very different from what emerged after Constantine. The anchor turned to another guest, a Catholic priest from New York. Father Rodriguez, your response? The priest's face was red, his voice tight with anger. This is a coordinated attack on the church by secular forces who've always wanted to undermine Christianity. We don't even know if this manuscript is real. The Vatican hasn't verified it. For all we know, this could be an elaborate hoax designed to confuse the faithful. But Dr. Hartley just said the carbon dating. Carbon dating can be manipulated. Documents can be forged. The devil is the father of lies. And this has his fingerprints all over it. Nora muted the television. Her phone rang. Marcus Wu. You okay? Her editor asked. Define okay. You're trending #1 on Twitter. #1 on Google. The article has been viewed 2 million times in 2 hours. Nora, this is unprecedented. What's the reaction from our advertisers? Marcus hesitated. 3 Catholic organizations have pulled their ads, but we've had 15 new advertisers reach out wanting to buy space. Net positive financially. But Nora, the threat, I know. I'm forwarding them all to Detective Reyes. The publisher wants to know if you'll do television interviews. Everyone wants you, 60 Minutes, Oprah, Joe Rogan. Not yet. Let the story breathe. Let people read it and think. I don't want to become the story. The manuscript is the story. After hanging up, Nora scrolled through social media. The responses split along predictable lines, but also some unexpected ones. Hey Rev Sarah Chen. I'm a Methodist pastor and I'm grateful for this discovery. Maybe it's time we examined whether we've been teaching fear instead of love. Hidden gospel. Aetius Doctor, this proves what we've been saying all along. Religion is just institutional control. Jesus probably didn't even exist, but if he did, the church definitely manipulated his message. A mom of Fort Texas. I don't care what some old manuscript says. I know Jesus is my personal savior. This is Satan trying to confuse people before the end times. Stand firm in faith. Trust God. I Buddhist monk LA. Fascinating that Jesus may have been teaching meditation and direct experience of the divine. This aligns with contemplative traditions across all religions. Wisdom. But it was the personal stories that broke Nora's heart and convinced her she'd made the right choice. 8 Depression Warrior. I was told my mental illness was caused by demons, that I wasn't praying enough. This article made me realize maybe I'm not spiritually deficient. Maybe I just have a medical condition. Thank you. A queer in faith. My church said being gay meant I was separated from God. But if Jesus taught that the kingdom is inside everyone, maybe I was never separated at all. Crying aunt. A grief journey mom. My son died last year. The pastor said it was God's plan. I've been so angry at God. But maybe God isn't a puppeteer. Maybe the divine is just consciousness experiencing life through all of us. That helps somehow. By 10 hours in AM, protests had begun outside St. Patrick's Cathedral in New York. About 200 people gathered, half holding signs supporting the church. The Bible is truth, reject false gospels, and half supporting the discovery. Let us read Jesus' real words. Police separated the two groups, but the tension was palpable. Nora watched the live stream on her phone. A young woman on the pro-manuscript side held a sign that read, "My daughter deserves to know she's not broken." Nora felt tears sting her eyes. Yes, that's why this mattered. Rome, Italy, March 22, 2025. Cardinal Giovanni Russo watched the news coverage from his apartment, his face gray with shock. The bottle of wine beside him was half empty, though it was barely afternoon. This was worse than he'd imagined. Much worse. The article hadn't just reached religious audiences. It had gone viral in secular circles too. Scientists, philosophers, psychologists, even celebrities were discussing it. Elon Musk had tweeted the link to his 200 million followers with a simple caption, "Read this. Everything you thought you knew about Christianity might be wrong." Within 3 hours, the tweet had been viewed 40 million times. Giovanni's phone rang constantly. Cardinals, bishops, Vatican officials, all asking the same questions. What do we do? How do we respond? Is this real? The Pope himself had called an emergency meeting for 6 o'clock. All senior Vatican officials were required to attend. But Giovanni already knew what would happen. The Church would issue a carefully worded statement expressing deep concern about the unverified claims and calling for rigorous scholarly review before jumping to conclusions. They would cast doubt without outright denying. They would buy time while they figured out how to contain the damage. Except the damage might be uncontainable. Giovanni pulled up his email and found a message from Father Thomas Brennan, the traitor who'd leaked the information. "Giovanni, I know you're angry. I know you feel betrayed. But I need you to understand something. I didn't do this to hurt you or the church. I did it because Sophie, my 10-year-old niece, tried to kill herself because she believed she was fundamentally sinful and unworthy of God's love. We've been teaching people to hate themselves for 2,000 years, to see themselves as broken and in need of external salvation, when Jesus' actual message may have been, you're not broken, you're light itself. Just wake up and remember." I spent 12 years in the archives. I read the suppressed texts. I know what we've been hiding and why. And I can't be part of that anymore. Not when children are dying because of the lies we've told. I'm not your enemy. Institutional dishonesty is the enemy. And if you're honest with yourself, you know it too. Thomas. Giovanni deleted the email without responding, then immediately regretted it and checked his trash folder to read it again. Sophie. He remembered Thomas mentioning his niece before, a sweet girl from the one time Giovanni had met her at a Vatican event 3 years ago. She'd been 7 then, full of questions about God and heaven and angels, and now she'd tried to end her life because of what the church had taught her. Giovanni poured another glass of wine. His hands shook so badly that some spilled on the desk. His phone buzzed again. A news alert. Vatican's secret archives whistleblower identified as former priest Thomas Brennan. So Thomas had gone public. No more anonymity, no more protection. Giovanni should have felt vindicated. The traitor exposed. But instead he felt tired. So incredibly tired. He thought about his brother Marco dying of leukemia at age 6. Marco had been terrified of death, gagging their mother, "Will God be mad at me? Did I do something bad?" "No, baby," their mother had said, holding him. "You're a perfect angel. God loves you so much." But the priest at Marco's funeral had talked about sin and redemption, about how even children needed Christ's sacrifice to enter heaven. Their mother had cried through the entire service, devastated not just by loss but by the suggestion that her 6-year-old son might not have been pure enough. What if Marco had died knowing he was light itself? Not a sinner in need of salvation, but consciousness experiencing a brief human life before returning to the infinite. Would that have been worse or better than the comfort of traditional faith? Giovanni didn't know anymore. Austin, Texas, March 20. Elon stood in the Tesla factory, watching the news coverage on the massive screens that usually displayed production data. Around him, engineers and workers had stopped to watch. A Fox News host interviewed an evangelical megachurch pastor. "Pastor Jim, you have 40,000 members in your congregation. How are you advising them to respond to this manuscript?" Pastor Jim's face filled the screen, tan, perfectly groomed, expensive suit. I flock that this is a test. The devil knows the end times are near, so he's releasing false gospels to deceive even the elect, just like Jesus warned in Matthew. This manuscript, if it even exists, was probably planted by Satan himself to turn people away from biblical truth. But the carbon dating, Satan can manipulate carbon atoms. He's the prince of this world. What we need to focus on is the Bible we have, the inspired Word of God, not some dusty old scroll that contradicts 2,000 years of Christian teaching. One of Elon's engineers, a young woman named Rachel, turned to him. "Mr. Musk, is the manuscript really authentic?" "Yes," Elon said simply. "I've seen it, held it, had it verified by multiple independent experts. It's real." "Then why are religious leaders saying it's fake?" "Because it threatens their authority. If people can access the divine directly, without intermediaries, then institutions lose their power." Rachel looked troubled. "I was raised Baptist. I've always believed the Bible was perfect and complete. If there were other gospels, why wouldn't God make sure they were included?" Elon considered his answer carefully. "Maybe God or consciousness, or whatever you want to call the source of reality, doesn't work through institutional control. Maybe truth is resilient enough to survive being buried. Maybe we're supposed to question and seek and verify, not just accept what authorities tell us." "That's scary though," Rachel said quietly. "If I can't trust my church, who can I trust? Yourself, your own direct experience. That's what this manuscript teaches. How to verify spiritual truth through personal experience, not belief." A notification appeared on Elon's phone. Dr. Patricia Goldstein had published her preliminary research findings on the neuroscience of the practice from Sang. The study showed measurable changes in brain function after just days of practice, reduced activity in the default mode network, increased gamma wave synchronization, patterns consistent with non-dual awareness states. Elon forwarded the study to his engineering team with a note: "This is technology more advanced than anything we're building. A method for upgrading human consciousness itself. Everyone should try it." His phone rang. An unknown number. He answered cautiously. "Mr. Musk, this is Bishop Michael Thornton, of the Anglican Communion. We met briefly at a conference in London 3 years ago." "I remember. What can I do for you, Bishop?" "I'm calling to say thank you for being brave enough to share this discovery. I've been a priest for 35 years, and I've always wondered why the church seemed more interested in control than liberation. This manuscript answers questions I've had my entire ministry." Elon was surprised. "You're not angry?" "Oh, plenty of my colleagues are furious. But me? I'm grateful. Christianity at its best has always been about transformation. The Greek word metanoia, which means fundamental shift in consciousness. Somehow we turned that into feel guilty and obey rules. Maybe this manuscript can help us remember what we were supposed to be about." "What will you do?" "Tomorrow, I'm teaching my congregation about the Gospel of Thomas, about how Jesus may have been showing us a practice, not building a religion. Some will leave, some will stay. But at least we'll be dealing with truth instead of comfortable myths." After they hung up, Elon felt a weight lift slightly. Not everyone was reacting with fear and anger. Some were reacting with curiosity and hope. By noon, Hidden Gospel was trending #1 worldwide on Twitter. The conversation had split into distinct camps. The deniers, claiming the manuscript was fake, a conspiracy, or satanic deception. The defenders, arguing this discovery enriched rather than threatened Christianity. The doubters, saying religion was all mythology anyway, and this proved it. The seekers, wanting to learn more, try the practice, experience it for themselves. It was the seekers who gave Elon hope. Millions of people saying, "I want to verify this myself. I want to try the breathing technique. I want to see if it works." That was the scientific method applied to spirituality. Not blind faith, not blind skepticism, just curiosity and willingness. By 2:11 p.m., someone had created a website, trythepractice.org. It provided instructions for the breathing technique from Sang Tanardate, along with Dr. Goldstein's Nauride's research and testimonials from people who'd tried it. Within hours, the site had 5 million visitors. Elon received a text from his mother. "I tried the practice this morning. For the first time in years, I felt completely at peace. Like I finally understood what I've been searching for my whole life. Thank you for being brave enough to share this." He typed back, "Thank you for raising me to question everything and seek truth. This is your influence as much as mine." Another text, this time from Detective Reyes. "My wife tried the practice. She's been struggling with anxiety for 15 years. Said she finally felt relief. Elon, you may have unleashed something that can't be contained." "Good," Elon replied. "It was meant to be free. That's why they buried it, because free people are hard to control." Mexico City, Mexico, March 20. Maria Rodriguez sat in her small apartment, nursing her 3-month-old son while reading Nora's article on her phone. Tears streamed down her face, falling onto the baby's soft head. For months, she'd been battling postpartum depression. The priest at her church had told her to pray more, to have more faith, to trust that God would lift the darkness if she was righteous enough. But the darkness hadn't lifted. It had deepened, and Maria had begun to believe she was a bad mother, a bad Catholic, a bad person, that something was fundamentally wrong with her soul. Now, reading about Jesus teaching that the kingdom was inside her, that she wasn't broken or sinful but temporarily forgetting her own light, Maria felt something crack open. What if her depression wasn't spiritual failure? What if it was just chemistry? Hormones? A medical condition that had nothing to do with her worthiness? She scrolled to the section about saying Temi 8, the breathing practice. Read the instructions. Decided to try it. She laid her son in his crib and sat on the floor. 4 counts in, 7 counts hold, teat counts out. At first, her mind was chaos. Worries about the baby, fears about her marriage, anxiety about money, but she kept breathing. After 20 minutes, something shifted. The depression was still there. It didn't magically disappear. But she realized she wasn't the depression. There was awareness underneath it, observing it, separate from it. For the first time in months, Maria felt hope. Not because God had blessed her with happy feelings, but because she discovered she was more than her feelings. That consciousness itself was untouched by the temporary storms of emotion. She picked up her son, held him close, and whispered, "You're not born in sin, mi amor. You're born as light. And I'm gonna make sure you know that." Singapore, March 21-25, 1:17 a.m., March 2012, 17 p.m. Harold Chen sat in his study, reading the article for the 3rd time. At 72, he'd been a Christian pastor for 50 years. He'd preached thousands of sermons about sin and salvation, about humanity's fallen nature and desperate need for Christ's redemption. What if he'd been wrong the entire time? His wife, Margaret, appeared in the doorway with tea. "You've been in here for 6 hours. Come to bed." "Margaret, I need to ask you something. When we lost Jenny, when our daughter died of cancer 20 years ago, do you remember what I told you?" Margaret's face tightened at the memory. "You said it was God's will, that he had a plan we couldn't understand. Did that help you?" Harold felt tears on his cheeks. "I think I gave you theology instead of truth. I repeated what I'd been taught, without asking if it was actually helpful or true. Why are you thinking about this now?" He showed her the article. What if Jesus taught that God isn't a tyrant in the sky making plans? What if the divine is just consciousness itself, experiencing every life, every joy, every tragedy? Not controlling it, but experiencing it with us. Would that be better or worse? I don't know, but it feels more honest, less cruel. Harold looked at his wife of 48 years. "I'm thinking about retiring, stepping down from the church. Because of this article? Because I've spent 50 years telling people they're sinners in need of salvation. And maybe, just maybe, I should have been telling them they're light temporarily forgetting how to shine." Margaret sat beside him. "So tell them that now. You don't have to retire. Just evolve, change. Admit you're learning too. The deacons will never accept it. The congregation will split. Then let it split. Truth is more important than unity built on lies." Harold looked at his wife with wonder. "When did you become so wise?" "Probably around the time you started teaching fear instead of love." she said gently. I've been waiting for you to remember what you knew when you were young, before seminary, before ordination, before you learned all the right answers. You used to say Christianity was about transformation, about becoming more fully human. Somewhere along the way, it became about obedience and punishment. That Sunday, Harold would preach his most honest sermon in 50 years. And yes, the church would split. But those who stayed would be there for truth, not comfort. And that, Harold would realize, was exactly as it should be. Global. March 20. By the morning of March 21st, the story had evolved beyond anyone's control. It was no longer just about a manuscript or a church controversy. It had become a mirror forcing humanity to examine what it believed and why. CNN International Headquarters, Atlanta, March 20. The network devoted an entire hour to the discovery. The host, Amanda Torres, moderated a panel of 5 experts: a Catholic theologian, a secular historian, a neuroscientist, a rabbi, and a former evangelical pastor who'd become an atheist. Dr. Rahman. Amanda addressed the neuroscientist. Your team has now replicated Dr. Goldstein's findings. What can you tell us? Dr. Yasmin Rahman, a Pakistani-American researcher from Johns Hopkins, adjusted her hijab and leaned forward. We studied 23 subjects practicing the technique described in Saying Tenfederain. After just 7 days, we observed significant changes in brain activity patterns. The default mode network, which creates our sense of separate self, showed reduced activity during practice. This aligns with what contemplatives across traditions have reported for millennia. So this practice actually works? Amanda asked. It produces measurable changes in consciousness. Yes. Whether you interpret that as accessing the kingdom of heaven or simply as achieving a meditative state depends on your worldview. But the neurological effects are real and reproducible. The Catholic theologian Father Michael O'Brien jumped in. But we must be cautious about conflating neurological states with spiritual truth. Satan can produce false experiences that feel profound but lead souls away from Christ. With respect, Father, the secular historian interrupted, that's exactly the kind of thinking that allowed the church to suppress alternative viewpoints for centuries. Anything that challenged authority was labeled demonic, because some things are demonic. Father O'Brien's face reddened. The church has wisdom accumulated over 2,000 years. We can't just throw that away, because some archaeologist found an old document. The rabbi, Sarah Goldstein, raised her hand. May I offer a different perspective? In Jewish mysticism, Kabbalah, we've always taught that the divine spark exists within every person. This idea isn't new or threatening. It's ancient wisdom. Perhaps Jesus was teaching what Jewish mystics had always known. Exactly, the former evangelical pastor said. I spent 20 years preaching hellfire and damnation. I told people they were worms, worthless sinners destined for hell unless they accepted Jesus. And you know what that created? Trauma, shame, self-hatred. If Jesus actually taught that we're light itself, that the kingdom is within us, then I wasted 20 years psychologically damaging people in his name. His voice broke. The camera caught tears in his eye. Amanda Torres let the moment breathe. Then, we're receiving thousands of messages from viewers. Let me read a few. She looked at her tablet. This one from Lisa in Ohio. I've struggled with suicidal thoughts my whole life because I believed I was worthless and sinful. Learning that Jesus might have taught I'm light itself. It's the first hope I've felt in years. Another from Marcus in Texas. This is clearly the devil's work. The Bible warns about false gospels in the end times. Anyone who believes this manuscript is being deceived. And this one from Dr. Chen in California. I'm a psychiatrist. I've been teaching the breathing technique to my patients with anxiety and depression. The results are remarkable. Why did we lose this knowledge? The conversation continued for 53 minutes, with no commercial breaks. By the end, no consensus had emerged, but the questions had deepened. Oxford University, England, March 22. 23 biblical scholars gathered in an emergency symposium. The room buzzed with excitement and tension. Dr. James Morrison, Chair of Religious Studies, called the meeting to order. Colleagues, we're here to discuss the Qumran manuscript. I've reviewed the carbon dating reports, the linguistic analysis, and the photographic evidence. I believe we can confirm this is authentic. A complete Gospel of Thomas dating to approximately 4. A scholar from Cambridge stood. If authentic, this is the earliest Christian text we possess. It predates Paul's letters, predates the canonical Gospels. This would be Jesus' teachings recorded within living memory of his ministry. Which raises the question. Another scholar interjected, why was it excluded from the canon? The Council of Nicaea in 35 AD chose which books would be in the Bible. What criteria did they use? Dr. Morrison pulled up a slide. Historical records show Constantine wanted a unified religion to hold his empire together. Texts that emphasized personal mystical experience over institutional authority were seen as destabilizing. The Gospel of Thomas, with its focus on individual enlightenment, didn't support the power structure Rome needed. So, political expediency determines scripture, someone muttered. It always has, Dr. Morrison said quietly. Scripture is as much about power as revelation. Which texts survive, which are suppressed? These decisions are made by humans with agendas. A scholar from Jerusalem spoke up. My colleagues in Israel have examined the cave where the manuscript was found. They confirm it's consistent with other Qumran discoveries. The copper scroll container, the linen wrapping, the chamber construction, all period appropriate. Unless this is the most sophisticated forgery in history, it's genuine. The room fell silent. Finally, Dr. Emily Bradford from Yale stood. I've spent 30 years studying early Christianity, and I have to say, this manuscript aligns with what we've suspected for decades. That early Christianity was far more diverse than the Orthodox tradition admits, that there were multiple Christianities, multiple interpretations of Jesus' message. The version that survived wasn't necessarily the most accurate, it was the most politically useful. Are you suggesting the church has been wrong for 2,000 years? Someone challenged. I'm suggesting the church preserved one interpretation among many, and suppressed the others. Whether that was right or wrong depends on your values. Do you value stability and institutional continuity, or diversity and personal autonomy? Within 3 days, the Oxford Symposium published a joint statement. Based on available evidence, the manuscript appears authentic. It represents a significant discovery requiring serious scholarly attention and theological reflection. 23 signatures. All respected academics, all putting their reputations behind the claim. The statement went viral within hours. Washington, D.C. March 20. The President of the United States faced an impossible situation. The White House had received over 5 million emails about the manuscript, roughly evenly split between those demanding government protection of religious freedom and those demanding government investigation of church suppression. The press secretary David Kumar stood at the podium in the White House briefing room. The president believes this is fundamentally a matter of personal faith. The United States government does not adjudicate theological disputes. Every American has the right to examine evidence and draw their own conclusions. We will not support any effort by any institution to suppress information or intimidate journalists. Freedom of the press and freedom of religion are both protected by the Constitution. A reporter shouted, "Is the president saying the church has been suppressing information?" The president is saying that truth should never be feared. If religious institutions are confident in their teachings, they should welcome scholarly examination rather than resist it. Will the government investigate the Vatican? The Vatican is a sovereign entity. We have no jurisdiction, but we will ensure that American researchers and journalists can pursue truth without harassment or intimidation. It was a carefully neutral statement, but the message was clear. The US government would not help the church contain this story. Tokyo, Japan. March 20. Kenji Nakamura had been a Buddhist monk for 15 years. At 41, he lived in a small temple in Kyoto, teaching meditation to visitors and maintaining the gardens. He'd always respected Christianity but never felt drawn to it, too focused on sin and salvation, not enough on present moment awareness. Then he read about the Gospel of Thomas. "This is Dharma," he said to his abbot, an 80-year-old master who'd spent 6 decades in monastic practice. Jesus was teaching the same thing Buddha taught. That suffering comes from identification with the separate self. That liberation comes from seeing through that illusion. The abbot smiled. Perhaps all great teachers point to the same moon. They use different words, different methods, but the destination is the same: waking up from the dream of separation. Kenji began teaching the breathing technique from saying 108 alongside traditional Buddhist meditation. Students reported similar scenarios whether they used Buddhist practices or Jesus's technique. The dissolution of the ego self, recognition of pure awareness, profound peace. It's not about religion, Kenji explained to a Japanese television reporter. It's about consciousness. Buddha understood it. Jesus understood it. Probably many others throughout history understood it. The techniques differ slightly, but they all point to the same truth, that our true nature is awareness itself, not the small self we think we are. The interview went viral in Asia. Within days, temples and meditation centers across Japan, Thailand, Korea, and Vietnam were teaching the practice from saying 108 alongside their traditional methods. Christianity and Buddhism, ancient rivals, suddenly discovered they'd been teaching the same thing all along, just in different languages. São Paulo, Brazil, March 24. Ana Silva was a single mother of 3, working 2 jobs to survive. She'd been raised Catholic, but had stopped going to church after her husband died in a construction accident 5 years ago. The priest had told her it was God's plan. She'd wanted to scream. Now, sitting in her small apartment after putting her children to bed, Anna read the article on her phone. Read about Jesus teaching that the kingdom was within her, that she wasn't broken or being punished. That consciousness itself was divine, and she was that consciousness experiencing a human life. She tried the breathing practice. 4 in, 7 hold, 8 out. Nothing happened the first time, or the second. But on the 3rd attempt, after 30 minutes of breathing, something shifted. For just a moment, Anna wasn't a struggling mother, wasn't a grieving widow, wasn't someone life had beaten down. She was awareness itself, vast, peaceful, whole. The circumstances of her life didn't disappear, but they no longer defined her. When she opened her eyes, she was crying. But not sad tears. Tears of recognition, of coming home to something she'd always been but had forgotten. The next day, Anna started a WhatsApp group with other mothers from her neighborhood. "Let's try this practice together," she wrote. "Let's see if it helps." Within a week, 50 mothers were meeting every morning in a local park, breathing together, supporting each other. They called themselves Las Luces, the lights. No church, no priest, no institution, just people remembering what they were. This pattern repeated across South America, grassroots groups forming spontaneously, people teaching each other. No central authority, no hierarchy, just shared practice and shared discovery. Exactly what Jesus had intended 2,000 years ago. Vatican City, March 20. Cardinal Giovanni Russo stood in St. Peter's Square watching the protests. Thousands had gathered, some defend the church, some demanding transparency, some simply seeking answers. A young woman held a sign, "Let us read all of Jesus's words, not just the approved ones." An older man countered with, "The Bible is complete. Reject Satan's deceptions." Giovanni felt ancient, exhausted, defeated. His phone buzzed. A text from Metropolitan Alexios, the Greek Orthodox leader from the video call. "Giovanni, I've been practicing the technique for 5 days. Whatever this is, it's real. I experienced what our mystics have described for centuries. Perhaps the truth is breaking free because it's time. Perhaps God is tired of institutions speaking for him." Giovanni walked back to his apartment and poured a glass of wine. Thought about his brother Marco. About Sophie, Thomas's niece. About all the people the church had told they were sinners when Jesus might have been teaching they were light. He pulled out a piece of paper and began writing. Not a defense of the church, not a denial of the manuscript, but something else. A confession. An admission that perhaps, just perhaps, the institution had been wrong. He didn't know if he'd ever release it, but writing it felt like the first honest thing he'd done in years. Outside his window, St. Peter's Basilica stood unchanged, but Giovanni knew that permanence was an illusion. Everything changed. Everything transformed. Even 2,000-year-old institutions built on secrets. The truth was hungry, and it was feeding. Los Angeles, California, March 25. Elon sat in his office at SpaceX, watching the sun set over the Pacific. The past 5 days had been a whirlwind. Interviews, threats, support, criticism, everything happening at once. But the thing that struck him most was the grassroots response. Millions of people trying the practice, sharing their experiences, forming communities, not waiting for institutions to give them permission. This was what technological disruption looked like when applied to consciousness itself. His phone rang. Dr. Castellanos from Tel Aviv. Elon, I have news. The Israeli Antiquities Authority has granted permission to excavate the other two sites from the manuscript coordinates. The ones with the geometric patterns. We begin next week. What do you think you'll find? More texts? Probably. More evidence that Jesus was teaching a specific technology for consciousness transformation. But Elon, what if it's bigger than Jesus? What if these practices are even older? What if multiple cultures discovered this independently? Then we're looking at something fundamental about human consciousness. Not religion, not culture-specific, but a feature of awareness itself that anyone can access. Exactly. This could be the most important discovery in human history. Not because it changes what Jesus taught, but because it reveals what humans are capable of becoming. After they hung up, Elon looked at the Starship prototype visible through his window. Humanity reaching for the stars. But what good was spreading to other worlds if humans didn't understand their own consciousness? Maybe this manuscript was preparing humanity for the next phase of evolution. Not physical evolution. Conscious evolution. Learning to be more than the small, fearful, separate selves that started wars and destroyed planets. Learning to be what they'd always been. Light itself, temporarily forgetting how to shine. Elon opened his laptop and began typing. Not a tweet. Not a statement. But code. He was building an app. Free. Open source. Teaching the practice from saying 108. Tracking user experiences. Collecting data. Applying the scientific method to ancient wisdom. If this worked, if millions of people could replicate the experience, then consciousness research would finally have what it needed: reproducible results. The kingdom within, made accessible through technology. Jesus would have approved, Elon thought. He was a teacher who wanted everyone to discover what he discovered. Not to worship him, but to become like him. Awake. Geneva, Switzerland. April. The Palais des Nations, home of the United Nations office at Geneva, had hosted countless historic gatherings, peace treaties, human rights conventions, climate negotiations. But nothing quite like this. The Truth Assembly, as the media had dubbed it, brought together over 300 people from across the world, religious leaders representing 2 billion believers, scientists studying consciousness, philosophers examining the nature of reality, and scholars debating the authenticity of ancient texts. Elon Musk stood near the entrance, watching people arrive. He'd funded the entire event, rented the space, paid for travel, provided security. $3 million. Cheap, he thought, for potentially reshaping human understanding. Dr. Miriam Castellanos arrived with an armed escort, her face showing the strain of 6 months under threat. Father Thomas Brennan, no longer wearing clerical garb, walked beside her. They'd become friends, two people who'd sacrificed everything for truth. Cardinal Giovanni Russo entered alone, his face drawn but determined. He'd released his confession 3 days ago, a 12-page document admitting the Church had suppressed texts that contradicted institutional doctrine. The Vatican had immediately suspended him. He no longer represented official Church positions. He represented only himself and conscience. Detective James Reyes coordinated security with Swiss police and UN personnel. Threats had poured in all week. Bomb threats, assassination warnings, promises of divine judgment. But James had assembled a team of 60 security professionals. Nobody was getting hurt on his watch. Nora Blackwood sat in the press gallery with 200 other journalists. Lily was still with her grandmother in Connecticut, safe and unaware that her mother was documenting history. The assembly would last 3 days. Day 1, evidence. Day 2, theology. Day 3, practice. At 9 a.m. precisely, the moderator, Dr. Amara Okonkwo, a Nigerian philosopher from Cambridge University, called this session to order. Welcome to the Truth Assembly. We gather not to declare winners or losers, but to examine evidence, share perspectives, and seek understanding. Let us begin. Day 1, evidence. April. Dr. Castellanos presented first. Behind her, a massive screen displayed photographs of the cave, the copper scroll container, and the manuscript itself. On September 14, 2024, my team discovered a sealed chamber in Cave Tiffin near Qumran. Inside, we found a complete Gospel of Thomas in Aramaic, carbon dated to approximately 45 AD. She clicked through slides showing lab reports. 3 independent laboratories confirmed the dating. Linguistic analysis confirms the Aramaic dialect is consistent with 1st century Judea. The manuscript is authentic. A murmur rippled through the hall. Professor David Klein from Hebrew University presented next. I've examined the papyrus, ink, and binding, all consistent with 1st century materials and techniques. Unless this is a forgery executed with impossible precision and resources, we are looking at a genuine 1st century Christian text. Dr. Emily Bradford from Yale followed. The Gospel of Thomas has been known in fragmentary form since 1945, discovered in Egypt. This complete version fills in gaps and provides context. The message is consistent. Jesus teaching direct experience of the divine rather than institutional mediation. Then came the opposition. Monsignor Carlos Mendoza from the Vatican stood, his red cassock bright against the modern hall. These scholars speak of authentication, but they ignore context. The early church fathers explicitly rejected the Gospel of Thomas as Gnostic heresy. Saint Irenaeus in 80 AD warned against such texts. Are we to believe the saints were wrong and modern academics are right? Yes, Dr. Bradford said simply. The saints were humans making decisions based on their political context. They chose texts that supported their theology and rejected those that didn't. That's history, not divine revelation. You dare. Monsignor Mendoza began. I dare to examine evidence, Dr. Bradford interrupted, which is what scholars do. With respect, Monsignor, the Church's authority doesn't trump facts. Reverend Sarah Chen stood. The Methodist minister had become one of the manuscript's most vocal supporters. May I offer a perspective? What if the early church fathers were doing their best with limited understanding? What if they genuinely believed they were protecting truth by suppressing alternative texts? We can honor their intentions while recognizing their limitations. Metropolitan Alexios, the 73-year-old Greek Orthodox leader, rose slowly. I have spent 50 years in monastic practice. I have studied the church fathers extensively, and I must say this manuscript troubles me not because it contradicts our faith, but because it completes it. The Orthodox tradition has always maintained that humans can participate in divine nature, theosis. This text suggests Jesus was teaching exactly that. The room buzzed. A major Orthodox leader supporting the manuscript carried enormous weight. Pastor Chen Wei from China spoke next, his words translated from Mandarin. In my country, Christians face persecution. We have no cathedrals, no seminaries, no institutional support. We have only the practice of gathering and seeking God directly. When I read this manuscript, I recognized what we've been doing for decades, finding the kingdom within without permission from authorities. Perhaps persecution stripped away everything except the essential truth. By lunch, a consensus was forming among the scholars. The manuscript was authentic. The theological implications were another matter. Day 2. Theology. April. The second day opened with a question from Dr. Okonkwo. If this manuscript is authentic, what does it mean for Christian doctrine? Father Thomas Brennan, seated in the audience rather than on any official panel, raised his hand. Dr. Okonkwo recognized him. I spent 12 years in the Vatican's secret archives, Thomas said, his voice steady. I read hundreds of suppressed texts. The pattern was clear. Anything emphasizing personal mystical experience over institutional authority was excluded. The Gospel of Thomas, the Gospel of Mary, the secret book of James, all taught that humans have direct access to the divine, that threatened the Church's role as gatekeeper. Are you saying the Church deliberately deceived people? Someone called out. I'm saying the Church made choices, chose stability over diversity, chose institutional continuity over individual freedom. Whether that was right or wrong depends on your values. Cardinal Russo stood, and the room fell silent. Everyone knew his story. The high-ranking official who'd confessed to suppression, been suspended, and now stood as a private citizen. I defended those choices for 30 years, Giovanni said quietly. I told myself we were protecting the faithful from confusion, that ordinary people couldn't handle mystical truths without guidance. that the church's authority was necessary for salvation. He paused, struggling with emotion. I was wrong. Not about everything. The church has done immeasurable good, but we confused the container with the content. We protected the institution at the expense of the truth it was meant to preserve. So what now? Dr. Okonkwo asked gently, what does Christianity become if this manuscript is accepted? Reverend Chen answered, Christianity becomes what it always should have been. A path to transformation rather than a system of control. Jesus didn't come to start a religion. He came to wake people up. We turned his teaching into doctrine, his practice into ritual, his liberation into law. A Baptist minister from Georgia stood, face red. This is heresy. The Bible is the inspired, inerrant Word of God. We can't just throw out 2,000 years of theology because some archaeologist found an old scroll. Why not? Asked Rabbi Sarah Goldstein. Judaism has been reinterpreting Torah for 3,000 years. We understand that revelation is ongoing, that understanding deepens. Why is Christianity so afraid of evolution? Because truth doesn't evolve. The Baptist minister shot back. Truth is eternal and unchanging, but human understanding of truth evolves. Metropolitan Alexios said softly. A child's understanding of love differs from an adult's, though love itself remains constant. Perhaps we've been reading scripture with a child's understanding, and this manuscript invites us to mature. The debate intensified. Conservative voices argued for maintaining tradition. Progressive voices argued for embracing new understanding. Mystics from various traditions, Sufi, Buddhist, Hindu, pointed out that what the Gospel of Thomas described was universal, not uniquely Christian. Then Lama Tenzin Dorje, the Tibetan Buddhist monk, spoke. In Buddhism, we have a concept. Don't mistake the finger pointing at the moon for the moon itself. Religious texts are fingers pointing. They're not the destination. Jesus was pointing toward direct experience of consciousness. Christians made the mistake of worshiping the finger instead of looking where it pointed. Elon, watching from the gallery, felt something click. That was it. Exactly. Religions became obsessed with the finger, the texts, the rituals, the institutions, and forgot to look at the moon, the actual experience of awakened consciousness. By evening, no theological consensus had emerged. But the conversation had deepened. People were thinking, questioning, reconsidering assumptions held for lifetimes. Day 3, the practice, April 3. The final day focused on the practice itself. Saying 1008's breathing technique, Dr. Patricia Goldstein presented her research. Brain scans filled the screens, showing before and after images of practitioners' neural activity. After 7 days of practice, we observed significant changes. The default mode network responsible for self-referential thinking shows reduced activity. Gamma wave synchronization increases. Subjects report dissolution of ego boundaries and profound peace. These aren't religious claims. They're measurable neurological effects. Dr. Yasmin Rahman from Johns Hopkins added her findings. We've now studied over 200 subjects. The effects are consistent across cultures, religions, and belief systems. Christians, Muslims, atheists, Buddhists, all report similar experiences when practicing this technique. This suggests we're looking at something fundamental about human consciousness, not culture-specific belief. Has anyone tried it who's willing to share their experience? Dr. Okonkwo asked. Cardinal Giovanni Russo stood. Every camera in the room focused on him. I tried the practice 5 days ago, Giovanni said, his voice thick with emotion. I've been a priest for 45 years. I've prayed countless rosaries, attended thousands of masses, read scripture daily, but I had never experienced what happened during that practice. He paused, gathering courage. For 20 minutes, the Cardinal Giovanni, who worries about church politics, who fears losing authority, who carries guilt about his brother's death, that person disappeared. What remained was just awareness, pure, peaceful, connected to everything. And I understood, for the first time in my life, what Jesus meant by the kingdom of heaven. It's not a place, it's not a reward, it's a state of consciousness accessible right now. Tears streamed down his face. I've spent 45 years telling people they need the church to reach God. But the truth is, and I say this as a suspended cardinal with nothing left to lose, We don't need intermediaries. God, consciousness, the divine, whatever you call it, is already within us. We just need to remember how to see it. The room erupted in applause from some quarters, angry shouts from others. Dr. Okonkwo raised her hands for silence. We have a proposal. 50 volunteers representing different faiths, different backgrounds, have agreed to practice the technique right now under observation with brain monitoring equipment. They'll practice for 30 minutes and then share their experiences. Would the assembly like to observe? The vote was unanimous. For the next 90 minutes, the hall watched 50 people sit in meditation while neuroscientists monitored their brain activity. On giant screens, EEG readings showed brain waves synchronizing, default mode networks quieting, gamma waves emerging. Elon sat beside his mother, who'd flown in from New York. They held hands, watching humanity take a collective breath. When the 30 minutes ended, the volunteers opened their eyes. Some were crying, some were smiling, some looked dazed. Dr. Okonkwo invited them to share. A Muslim woman from Indonesia spoke first. I am devout. I pray 5 times daily. But this practice showed me something beyond prayer. I felt Allah not as separate from me, but as the consciousness I am. Closer than my jugular vein, the Quran says. Now I understand. An atheist professor from Sweden. I don't believe in God. But I just experienced something I can't explain. Not God as a being, but consciousness as fundamental. Like I'm not a separate entity but an expression of something vast experiencing itself. A Catholic priest from Ireland. I've celebrated Mass for 30 years. This 30-minute practice brought me closer to Christ than 3 decades of ritual. Not because ritual is wrong, but because this is what Christ was actually teaching us to do. A Hindu teenager from India. This is what yogis have practiced for thousands of years. Same technique, slightly different method. Jesus was a yogi. Buddha was a yogi. They all discovered the same truth about consciousness. 50 people. 50 different backgrounds. 50 similar experiences. The scientific method applied to spirituality. Hypothesis. Tested. Results replicated. Conclusion. Consciousness is stranger, deeper, more accessible than institutional religion had admitted. Cardinal Giovanni Russo watched the testimonies and felt something he hadn't felt in decades. Hope. Not hope that the church would survive unchanged, but hope that truth would prevail, that humans would mature beyond needing institutions to mediate their relationship with the divine. He caught Father Thomas's eye across the room. Thomas nodded slightly. 2 men who'd chosen truth over lordle, understanding each other without words. Reverend Sarah Chen stood for a closing statement. We've spent 3 days examining evidence, debating theology, and testing practice. Here's what I believe we've learned. Jesus wasn't starting a religion. He was teaching a technology, a method for transforming consciousness. Later followers with good intentions turned that technology into an institution. They created rules, hierarchies, doctrines. Some of that was helpful. Much of it obscured the original teaching. She gestured to the volunteers. These 50 people just proved that anyone can access what Jesus was teaching. No priest required. No sacrament required. No institution required. Just a practice and willingness to try. So where does that leave the church? Someone called out. Where it's always been, Sarah said. As a community of seekers supporting each other. But no longer claiming exclusive access to truth. No longer standing between people in direct experience of the divine. Christianity doesn't die from this revelation. It's reborn, returns to what it was meant to be before Rome turned it into an empire. Metropolitan Alexios stood. I agree. The church, all churches must become servants of truth rather than guardians of dogma. We help people practice. We create space for transformation. We build community, but we stop claiming we're the only path to God. Elon felt his phone vibrate. A message from his lead engineer at SpaceX. The app is ready. Trythepractice.org goes live in 10 minutes. We're expecting 10 million users in the first week. He showed his mother the message. May smiled. Technology serving consciousness. Your father would have thought you were crazy. I think you're brilliant. I'm just asking questions, Elon said. Same ones I asked in that Pretoria library at 13. What's real? What's true? How do we know? And now you have answers. I have a practice that produces verifiable results. That's as close to truth as I know how to get. Dr. Okonkwo made final announcements. The Truth Assembly concludes. But our work continues. Several institutions are establishing research centers to study consciousness transformation. The practice will be taught freely, openly, without copyright or restriction, because truth, once freed, belongs to everyone. As people filed out, conversations continued in clusters. Religious leaders who'd arrived as enemies left as colleagues. Scientists who'd been skeptical admitted they needed to revise their understanding. Journalists filed stories that would dominate headlines for weeks. Nora stood in the plaza outside, video calling Lily. "How was it, Mom? Did you change the world?" Nora laughed. "I don't know about changing the world, baby. But I think the world is changing itself. We just gave it permission. When can you come get me?" "I miss you." "Tomorrow, sweetie. I promise." Detective James Reyes approached Nora. "There's been a development. The person who tried to break into Dr. Castellanos' hotel room in Israel. He's talking, says he was hired by someone in the Vatican to retrieve the manuscript by any means necessary. Israeli police are investigating. Will there be charges? Against individuals, probably. Against the Vatican as an institution." James shrugged. "Hard to prove. But it's another crack in the wall of institutional credibility." Dr. Castellanos joined them, looking exhausted but peaceful. "I'm returning to Israel tomorrow. We begin excavating the second site from the manuscript coordinates. More hidden chambers. Possibly more texts. What do you think you'll find?" Nora asked. "Evidence that this wisdom is older and more universal than we thought. That Jesus was one teacher among many who discovered the same truth about consciousness. That humanity has been forgetting and remembering this knowledge for millennia." Miriam smiled. Raphael would have loved this, the adventure, the discovery, the implications. "Maybe he's experiencing it with you," Nora suggested gently. "If consciousness is fundamental and eternal, maybe death is just a change in form, not an ending." "Maybe," Miriam said. "I don't know, but the practice has helped me feel connected to something bigger than my grief. And that's enough." Elon stood alone on the plaza steps, watching the sun set over Geneva. Around him, 300 people dispersed, carrying new ideas back to their communities, their countries, their lives. The app would launch in 3 minutes. Millions would try the practice. Some would experience profound transformation. Some would find it didn't work for them. That was fine. The point wasn't universal conversion. The point was universal access. For 2,000 years, institutions had claimed monopoly on spiritual truth. Now truth was being returned to the people. His phone buzzed. His oldest son with Grimes, was video calling. "Dad, are you famous now? I saw you on TV." Elon laughed. "I guess so, buddy. How do you feel about that?" "It's cool. My friend's mom said you're trying to destroy Christianity, but I told her you're just trying to find out what's true. That's what scientists do." "That's exactly right. Thank you for understanding." "Dad, can you teach me that breathing thing? The one that makes people feel peaceful?" Elon felt his throat tighten. Yes, I can teach you. When I get home, we'll practice together." After hanging up, Elon thought about the future. His children would grow up in a world where spiritual practice was as accessible as meditation apps and as testable as scientific hypotheses. Where claiming exclusive truth was seen as arrogant rather than faithful. Where institutions served seekers rather than controlling them. A better world. Not perfect, but more honest. The notification appeared, trythepractice.org. Was live. Within 5 minutes, 10,000 people had downloaded the app. Within an hour, 100,000. By morning, 5 million. The practice Jesus had taught, hidden for 2,000 years, suppressed by those who feared its implications, was finally free. And hungry minds around the world were ready to see what happened when you looked within and remembered what you'd always been. Light itself. Temporarily forgetting. Now remembering. Multiple locations. April 4th. The world didn't end. That surprised many people who'd predicted apocalypse. Instead, Something subtler happened. Something that would take years to fully understand, but began in those quiet moments when millions of people scattered across the globe closed their eyes and breathed. 4 counts in. 7 counts hold. 8 counts out. Vermont, USA, April. Father Thomas Brennan, though he no longer used that title, stood in the morning light streaming through the windows of St. Benedict's Monastery. 40 people sat in silent practice. Some were former Catholics seeking what they'd lost. Some were spiritual seekers who'd never belonged to any tradition. Some were simply curious. His niece Sophie sat in the front row, eyes closed, face peaceful. The 10-year-old who tried to end her life 6 weeks ago now breathed with the rhythm of someone who'd discovered she was more than her thoughts, more than her pain, more than the labels the world had given her. After 30 minutes, Thomas rang a small bell. Eyes opened, faces showed the telltale signs, tears, smiles. That slightly dazed look of someone who'd briefly touched something beyond ordinary consciousness. How many of you experienced the dissolution of the separate self? Thomas asked. 35 hands rose. How many felt connected to something larger? 40 hands. And how many of you felt like sinners in need of salvation? Not a single hand. Thomas smiled. That's because Jesus wasn't teaching sin and salvation. He was teaching recognition and remembering. You just remembered what you are, consciousness itself, temporarily wearing a human form, nothing to fix, nothing to save, just something to wake up to. Sophie raised her hand. Thomas, can I ask something? Of course, sweetie. If we're already the kingdom, if we're already light, why did we forget? Why did we have to remember? Thomas sat down, bringing himself to her level. That's the deepest question, Sophie. I don't know for certain. But maybe consciousness wanted to experience what it's like to forget itself so it could experience the joy of remembering. Like playing hide and seek with yourself. An older woman, maybe 60, spoke up. I was raised to believe I was born sinful, that I needed to be cleansed by Christ's blood. For 57 years I've carried shame. But just now, during the practice, I felt innocent. Not because I was forgiven, but because there was nothing to forgive. Was that real, or did I imagine it? You experienced it, Thomas said. That makes it real. The question isn't whether the experience was real. It's whether you trust your own experience or whether you need an institution to validate it for you. I think I trust myself, she said quietly. Maybe for the first time in my life. This scene repeated itself in thousands of locations. Community centers, yoga studios, churches that had opened their doors to practice. Living rooms where families gathered. Within 2 weeks of the Truth Assembly, an estimated 20 million people worldwide had tried the practice. Not all experienced profound shifts. Some found it boring. Some felt nothing. Some thought it was just relaxation. But enough people experienced something. Something real. Something transformative. That word spread organically. No marketing needed. Just person to person. Try this. See what happens. Boston, Massachusetts. April. Detective James Reyes stood before 200 police officers and first responders in a union hall. He'd been invited to speak about managing stress and PTSD. Instead, he decided to tell the truth. 15 years ago, I came back from Iraq carrying demons. James began. Night terrors, hypervigilance, rage I couldn't control. My marriage almost ended. My kids were afraid of me. The VA gave me medications that dulled the pain but also dulled everything else. I was surviving, not living. He pulled up a slide, showing his brain scan from Dr. Goldstein's research. This is my brain 3 weeks ago. See this area? He pointed to the default mode network. That's the part of the brain that creates your sense of self, your narrative about who you are. For me, that narrative was, I'm broken, I'm damaged, I'm a combat veteran who can't adjust to normal life. Another slide. This is my brain after practicing the technique from the manuscript for 2 weeks. Notice the difference? The default mode network has quieted. During practice, the James who is broken temporarily stops existing. What's left is just awareness, peaceful, whole, undamaged by trauma. A firefighter in the back raised his hand. You're saying breathing exercises cured your PTSD? No. PTSD is still there. The memories haven't disappeared. But I've discovered I'm not the memories. I'm the awareness in which memories appear. And that awareness was never traumatized. It was always whole, always peaceful, just covered over by the noise of a damaged nervous system in a traumatic narrative. A female cop, maybe 35, stood up. I lost my partner 2 years ago, shot in the line of duty. I've been drinking myself to sleep every night since. Are you telling me breathing is going to fix that? James met her eyes. No. I'm telling you that underneath your grief, underneath your pain, underneath the guilt and the rage and the emptiness, there's something that was never touched by any of that. And you can access it, not to escape your grief, but to give yourself space to grieve without being destroyed by it. He saw tears on her face. Try it, James said softly. Just try it. 30 minutes. If it doesn't help, you've lost nothing. But if it does, after the presentation, 67 officers signed up for a weekly practice group. James led them himself, teaching what he'd learned, that you could carry trauma and still access peace. That healing didn't mean erasing the past. It meant discovering you were larger than your past. Within a month, James was getting calls from police departments across the country, fire departments, EMT services, military veteran groups, all asking the same thing. Can you teach us? One practice. Spreading like water, finding cracks in concrete. Silicon Valley, California. Tech companies, always hungry for the next productivity hack, discovered the practice. Google, Apple, Meta. All began offering consciousness labs where employees could learn the technique. But something unexpected happened. Rachel Chen, the Tesla engineer who'd questioned Elon about the manuscript, started practicing daily. After 2 weeks, she walked into her manager's office and quit. I've been building electric cars because I thought I was saving the planet, she said. But during practice, I realized the planet doesn't need saving. Consciousness doesn't need saving. It's already whole. What needs to change is how we see ourselves and each other. So I'm going to teach this practice full-time. That feels more important than optimizing battery efficiency. Her manager tried to argue. Rachel was brilliant, irreplaceable, but she was resolute. You can replace me, she said. You can't replace what people discover when they stop identifying with their thoughts and remember what they are. Within a month, 17 Tesla engineers had quit to teach the practice. Dozens more at other tech companies. A brain drain, but not toward competing companies, toward something beyond capitalism entirely. Elon received an email from one of them. Thank you for sharing the manuscript. You gave me a mission more important than building technology. Now I'm helping people build consciousness. That's the real innovation. Elon forwarded the email to his mother with a note, I think we've accidentally started a revolution. May replied, not accidentally, inevitably. Truth is always revolutionary. Vatican City, April 20. Pope Francis called an extraordinary consistory, a formal meeting of all cardinals worldwide. Over 200 gather in the Sistine Chapel, beneath Michelangelo's ceiling, where God reached toward Adam with an outstretched finger, the finger pointing at the moon. The 88-year-old Pope stood before them, his face showing every year of age and wisdom. Brothers, we face a crisis. Not the crisis many predicted of atheism destroying faith or science invalidating religion, but a different crisis. The revelation that we may have been teaching fear when Christ taught freedom. Murmurs rippled through the assembled cardinals. I have practiced the technique from the manuscript, the Pope continued. As your spiritual father, I cannot ask you to accept something I haven't verified myself. And I must tell you, I experienced the kingdom. Not as metaphor, not as future reward, but as present reality, accessible through a shift in consciousness. Several cardinals gasped. The Pope practicing a technique from a suppressed gospel? This does not invalidate our tradition, Francis said firmly. It completes it. The mystics of our church, Teresa of Avila, John of the Cross, Meister Eckhart, they all described similar experiences, direct union with the divine, dissolution of the separate self, but we marginalized them, called their teachings advanced or dangerous. We told ordinary believers they needed sacraments and priests. We became gatekeepers instead of guide. Cardinal Russo, still technically suspended but invited by the Pope himself, stood, Holy Father, if we acknowledge this, we acknowledge centuries of institutional error. The authority of the Church, Francis interrupted gently, comes from serving truth, not suppressing it. If we built our authority on lies, even well-intentioned lies, then our authority deserves to crumble. The room erupted in argument. Conservative cardinals demanded fidelity to tradition. Progressive cardinals called for radical reform. Moderate voices sought compromise. Finally, Francis raised his hand for silence. I am calling for a new ecumenical council, the first since Vatican II in 1965. We will examine all suppressed texts. We will invite scholars, mystics, and practitioners from all traditions. We will ask the hardest question: what did Jesus actually teach, and how did we lose it? And if we discover we were wrong, someone called out. Then we were wrong, Francis said simply. Being wrong is not the sin. Refusing to correct ourselves once we know better, that is the sin. The vote, when it came, was closer than expected, 62% in favor of the new council. Enough to proceed. Christianity was about to examine its own foundations. Some would crumble, some would prove stronger than expected. But nothing would remain unchanged. Antarctica, April. The expedition reached the third coordinate from the manuscript. Dr. Castellanos led a team of 20 scientists and archaeologists across the frozen wasteland, following GPS coordinates that seemed impossibly precise for a 2,000-year-old text. There, her assistant David pointed to an outcropping of rock barely visible through the snow. They began excavating carefully. Within hours, they'd uncovered an entrance, not a natural cave, but a carved doorway sealed with stone. This is impossible, David breathed. Human civilization wasn't in Antarctica 2,000 years ago. The continent was undiscovered until, maybe undiscovered by modern humans, Miriam said. Or maybe the coordinates aren't 2,000 years old. Maybe they're much older. And Jesus was simply passing along knowledge that predated him. They opened the seal. Inside, perfectly preserved by the cold, they found a chamber covered in the same geometric patterns from the Qumran cave. But also something else, texts in multiple languages: Sanskrit, Ancient Greek, Egyptian hieroglyphics, Aramaic, Chinese characters, all describing the same practice, the same understanding, the same truth about consciousness. Oh my God, Miriam whispered. This isn't Christian, this isn't Jewish, this is human. This knowledge existed before any of our religions, before any of our civilizations. It's the original teaching, the source code for consciousness itself. They spent 12 hours documenting everything, working in shifts to combat the cold. The text described advanced practices, extensions of the basic technique, methods for deepening and stabilizing awakened consciousness. One section, translated from Sanskrit, read, "When humans forget what they are, suffering arises. Religions form to help them remember, but religions themselves forget, becoming obstacles instead of pathways. Then the teaching must be rediscovered, renamed, reborn. This has happened countless times. This will happen countless more. Truth cannot be destroyed, only temporarily obscured." Miriam felt tears freeze on her cheeks. We're not discovering something new, we're rediscovering something ancient. Something humanity keeps losing and finding across millennia. Why do we keep losing it? David asked. Because institutions form around the teaching, then gradually prioritize their own survival over the truth they were meant to protect. It's not malicious, it's just human. Organizations become self-preserving. They forget their purpose. So this will happen again? Someone will suppress this knowledge in another 1,000 years? Maybe, Miriam said. Or maybe this time is different. Maybe technology, the internet, global communication makes information harder to suppress. Maybe we've reached a point where truth, once freed, stays free. They sealed the chamber and began the journey back to their base camp. Behind them, ancient wisdom slept again beneath the ice, waiting for the next generation of seekers. But now copies existed, photographs, translations, data stored in clouds and servers scattered across the globe. The truth had escaped containment. Los Angeles, California, April. Elon sat in his office at SpaceX, watching the sunset paint the sky orange and purple. On his screens, real-time data from trythepractice.org showed 42 million people had downloaded the app. 12 million were practicing daily. The data was remarkable. Self-reported depression scores dropping by an average of 37% after 2 weeks. Anxiety scores down 42%. Relationship satisfaction up. Life meaning up. Materialism and status seeking down. People were changing. Not through belief or doctrine, but through direct experience of what they were beneath the surface of thoughts and emotions. His phone rang. His son X. Dad, I did the breathing thing for 10 minutes. Nothing happened, but it was kind of fun. Can we make it a game? Elon laughed. Sure, buddy. What kind of game? Like, we breathe together and whoever stays quietest longest wins. That's perfect. That's exactly what meditation is, making a game of being present. After hanging up, Elon thought about the future. His children would grow up in a world where consciousness exploration was as normal as physical exercise, where the question "who am I" was treated as seriously as "what should I do?" A world where institutions served seekers instead of controlling them, where authority came from wisdom rather than position, where power meant capacity to transform rather than capacity to dominate. Not utopia. Humans would still struggle, still hurt each other, still make mistakes, but perhaps with more awareness, more compassion, more recognition that harming others was harming themselves. A message appeared from Nora Blackwood. Just put Lily to bed. She asked if Jesus was like a scientist teaching people how to see better. I said yes, exactly like that. Thank you for starting this, Elon. Not just for adults, for the kids who'll grow up knowing they're not broken. Elon felt something warm in his chest. This was why he'd risked everything. Not for his reputation or his companies or his legacy. For the children. For the next generation. For the possibility that humans might finally grow up spiritually, not just technologically. He opened his laptop and began writing. Not a tweet, not a business email, but a letter to his children, to be read when they were older. When you read this, you'll be adults. The world will have changed in ways I can't predict. But I want you to know why I did what I did I discovered something that had been hidden for 2,000 years, not because it was false, but because it was dangerously true. Jesus taught that you are not separate from the divine, that the kingdom of heaven is inside you right now, that you are consciousness itself, temporarily experiencing being human. This threatened institutions that wanted to stand between people and God. So they buried it. But truth doesn't die. It just waits for the right moment to be reborn. When I found this teaching, I had a choice: stay silent and safe, or speak up and face consequences. I chose truth, because I wanted you to grow up in a world where truth matters more than comfort, where courage matters more than security, where consciousness evolution matters more than technological evolution. You are not your thoughts. You are not your emotions. You are not your body or your achievements or your failures. You are the awareness in which all of that appears. You are light itself, playing at being human. Never let anyone tell you different. Never let any institution claim authority over your direct experience of what you are. Question everything. Verify everything. Trust your own consciousness. That's the real inheritance I want to leave you. Not money or companies or fame, but freedom. The freedom that comes from knowing what you are. Love. Dad. He saved the letter and scheduled it to be sent to each of his children on their 18th birthdays. Outside, the stars appeared as darkness deepened. Somewhere up there, beyond Earth's atmosphere, beyond the solar system, beyond the galaxy, consciousness experienced itself through billions of forms. And on this small blue planet, a growing number of those forms were remembering what they'd always been. Not because a church told them, not because a text commanded them, but because they'd looked within and seen for themselves. The kingdom wasn't coming. It had always been here. Humanity was just finally learning to see it. New York City, April 5th. Nora Blackwood sat on her apartment balcony, watching the city lights blur into a tapestry of human activity. Somewhere in that vast metropolis, hundreds of thousands of people were practicing, breathing, remembering, waking up. Her phone showed the article statistics: 200 million views, translated into 47 languages, cited in thousands of academic papers, sermons, blog posts, arguments, and revelations. But the number that mattered most was simpler: 0. 0 days since she'd felt afraid. 0 days since she'd questioned whether publishing was the right choice. 0 regrets. Lily appeared in the doorway, holding her stuffed rabbit. "Mom, can we do the breathing thing together before I sleep?" "Of course, sweetie." They sat cross-legged on the floor, mother and daughter breathing in unison. 4 in, 7 hold, 8 out. Nora watched her daughter's face relax, the worry lines smoothing. At 8 years old, Lily was learning something Nora hadn't learned until 38, that she was larger than her circumstances. That peace wasn't something to achieve, it was something to remember. After 10 minutes, Lily opened her eyes. "I felt light, Mom, like I was glowing from the inside." "You are glowing, baby. You've always been glowing. Sometimes we just forget to notice." "Will I always remember now?" "Probably not. We're human. We forget and remember. Forget and remember. But now you know how to remember when you've forgotten. That's the gift." Lily hugged her rabbit close. "I'm glad you wrote that story, Mom. Even though it made some people mad, being brave is better than being safe." "Who taught you that?" "You did." Lily smiled. Every day. After Lily fell asleep, Nora returned to the balcony. Her phone buzzed. A message from Father Thomas. "Sophie is thriving. She starts teaching other kids the practice next week. Thank you for believing the truth was worth the risk." Another message from Dr. Castellanos. "We found it, evidence that this wisdom is thousands of years older than Jesus. It's humanity's inheritance, lost and found over and over. But maybe this time we can keep it." And finally, one from Elon. The app hit 50 million users. But more importantly, suicide hotline calls are down 18% this month. People are finding reasons to live, not through belief, but through remembering what they are. We did this. All of us. Thank you. Nora looked up at the stars, barely visible through the city's light pollution. Somewhere beyond that veil of artificial brightness, the universe stretched infinitely. And somehow, impossibly, wonderfully, she was that universe, experiencing itself through the temporary form of a journalist mother who'd chosen truth over safety. The kingdom of heaven wasn't coming. It was here. It had always been here. Humanity was just finally coming home. And that was the end of this story. A story about truth hidden for 2,000 years. About courage in the face of institutions. About ordinary people discovering extraordinary things within themselves. But here's the real question. Where are you listening from, right now? Drop a comment below and let me know what country or city you're in. I love seeing how far these stories travel across the globe. If this story made you think, made you feel something, or opened your mind to new possibilities, please hit that like button. It helps more people discover these stories. And don't forget to subscribe to the channel for much more content like this. Stories that challenge what we think we know. That explore the mysteries of consciousness, history, and human potential. Most importantly, share this video with your friends and family. Not everyone gets to hear stories like this. By sharing, you're not just spreading entertainment. You're spreading awareness, curiosity, and kindness. You're helping others question, explore, and discover. Because truth, once freed, belongs to everyone. Until the next story, keep questioning, keep seeking, keep remembering what you are.